My son told me to get out of my own house because his wife's wealthy parents needed a vacation. He thought I was just a retired old man living on a pension. He didn't know I owned the bank that holds his father-in-law's mortgage. I didn't argue with him. I simply packed my bags. I left a bottle of cheap wine and a black leather book on the kitchen counter. My son thought he had won. He didn't know that by the time he signed the last page of that book, he would owe me $1.2 million and his marriage would be over. Before I tell you how I brought their world crashing down, let me know in the comments if you have ever been underestimated by your own family. My name is Caleb Turner. I am 68 years old. Most people see me as a quiet man who likes fishing and wears worn-out flannel shirts. They see the gray hair and the slow walk and they assume I am just another retiree waiting for the end. They are wrong. I spent 40 years as a structural engineer. I built the skyline of this city. I poured concrete into the foundations of skyscrapers that touch the clouds. When I retired, I didn't stop working. I just moved my office. I was standing on the balcony of my wooden beach house in Malibu. The ocean air was salty and cold, but I wasn't looking at the waves. I was looking at a document on my table. It was a site clearance agreement worth $50 million. My signature was the only thing standing between a massive new resort development and the breaking of ground. I held my favorite fountain pen, the heavy brass one I had used to sign every major deal since 1995. The ink was wet on the page when my phone rang. It was Tyrell, my only son. I looked at the screen. He hadn't called me in 3 months, not since he needed money to fix the transmission on his leased BMW. I didn't answer immediately. I capped my pen. I took a breath. I prepared myself for the disappointment that always came with his voice. I answered, "Hello, Tyrell." There was no greeting, no question about my health, no warmth, just a demand wrapped in a nervous, arrogant tone. "Dad, you need to clear out of the beach house." I frowned. I looked around my living room. It was simple, rugged. It was filled with African art I had collected over decades and the smell of old books. It was my sanctuary. "Excuse me," I asked calmly. "You need to go back to your apartment in the city," Tyrell said. His voice was rushed. He sounded like he was checking a watch. "Emily's parents are flying in tomorrow. The Montgomerys. They want to spend a month in Malibu. They have never been to the coast, and they need a place to stay." I felt a cold tightness in my chest. It wasn't the request itself. It was the assumption. He wasn't asking. He was ordering. "Tyrell, I am currently working on something important here," I said. My voice was steady. "I cannot just leave. This is my home. Working." Tyrell scoffed. The sound was ugly. "Dad, you are retired. You potter around in the garden and fix old toasters. Stan and Karen Montgomery are important people. Stan is an investor. They are used to a certain standard of living. They can't stay in a hotel. It's impersonal. I told them they could use your place. You told them they could use my house without asking me first," I clarified. "Yes," Tyrell snapped, "because I didn't think you would be selfish. Look, Dad, this is huge for me. If I pull this off, if I show them we have assets, Stan might finally respect me. He might invest in my ideas. Don't embarrass me." I walked over to the wall where a framed photo of my late wife Sarah hung. She was smiling. She had always spoiled Tyrell. She had shielded him from the harsh realities of the world. Maybe she had shielded him too much. "I am not going to leave, Tyrell," I said. "Tell them to book a suite at the Four Seasons if they are so important." The explosion on the other end of the line was immediate. "You are unbelievable," Tyrell shouted. "You are just a bitter old man sitting in a house that is too big for you." You know what Stan said? He said it is a waste for someone like you to have that view. And he is right. You don't appreciate it. You don't even know how to host people. You are going to ruin my marriage. Emily is already stressed. If you don't do this, don't expect to see us for Thanksgiving. Don't expect to see us at all." I listened to his threats. I listened to the disrespect dripping from his words. He was ashamed of me. He was ashamed of his black father with the calloused hands. He wanted to present my property as his own offering to his white upper-class in-laws to buy their approval. I looked down at the $50 million contract on my table. It was titled, "Blue Horizon Resort Development, Phase 1 Demolition." The address listed for demolition was this house, my house. Tyrell didn't know. He didn't know I had secretly bought the entire coastline. He didn't know I was the developer. He didn't know this house was scheduled to be leveled by bulldozers in 14 days to make way for a luxury lobby, a plan formed in my mind. It was cold, it was sharp, it was perfect. If he wanted the house so badly, he could have it. He could have it for exactly as long as it stood. "All right, son," I said. The change in my tone was abrupt. Tyrell paused. He hadn't expected me to fold. "Really?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "I don't want to ruin your marriage. I don't want to embarrass you. I will pack my things tonight. I will be gone by morning." "Good," Tyrell said. The relief in his voice was sickening. "Leave the keys under the mat. And Dad, please clean up a bit. Put away some of that weird art you have. Stan prefers a minimalist aesthetic. We don't want to spook them." Spook them. I looked at the tribal mask my grandfather had carved in Georgia 100 years ago. "I won't spook them, Tyrell," I promised. "I will leave everything exactly as it should be." I hung up the phone. I didn't feel anger anymore. I felt the cold precision of an engineer calculating a controlled implosion. I spent the next 3 hours packing. I took my clothes. I took my important documents. I took the photo of Sarah. I cleared my personal items from the master bedroom, but I didn't clean up the art. I left every piece exactly where it was. Then I went to my study. I opened the safe. I took out a thick leather-bound book. It looked like a high-end guest registry. It had heavy cream-colored paper and a gold ribbon. I sat at my desk and opened the book to the last page. I picked up my pen. I drafted a document. It looked like a welcome note. It read like a standard liability waiver. But the fine print, the dense paragraphs on the previous pages were a commercially binding short-term lease agreement for a commercial demolition zone. Clause 4 stated that the tenant accepted full responsibility for the property in its current state. Clause 10 stated that any obstruction to scheduled construction work would result in financial penalties calculated by the hour. Clause 15 stated that the signee accepted all liability for environmental damages and utility misuse. I placed the book on the kitchen island. I placed a pen on top of it. Next to the book, I placed a bottle of wine. It was a $5 bottle I used for cooking. I peeled off the price tag. It looked cheap. It tasted like vinegar. It was the perfect welcome gift for Stan and Karen Montgomery. I went to the utility closet. I opened the panel for the security system. I didn't turn it off. I upgraded the cloud storage plan. I activated the internal cameras in the living room and the kitchen. I set the audio recording to high sensitivity. I wasn't just leaving my home, I was setting a stage. I walked out to the balcony one last time. The moon was hitting the water. I thought about Tyrell. I thought about the boy I taught to ride a bike. I thought about the man who just told me I was a waste of space. He wanted to play the big shot. He wanted to play the owner of a beach house. He wanted to live in my world. He was about to find out that my world has heavy machinery and ironclad contracts. I walked out the front door. I put the key under the mat. I got into my truck. I didn't look back. I drove to my penthouse in the city. It is on the 45th floor. It has glass walls and a view of the entire skyline. Tyrell has never been there. He thinks I live in a one-bedroom apartment in the old neighborhood. I poured myself a glass of aged whiskey. I sat in my Eames chair. I opened my laptop and pulled up the live feed from the beach house cameras. The screen flickered to life. The living room was empty and silent. The cheap wine bottle sat on the counter like a trap waiting to be sprung. I waited. The sun came up. At 10 in the morning, a black SUV pulled into the driveway, then another. They were rentals. Shiny, oversized, unnecessary. I leaned forward. The front door opened. Tyrell walked in first. He looked nervous. He was sweating. He was wearing a polo shirt that was too tight and loafers that looked uncomfortable. Then Emily walked in. My daughter-in-law. She didn't look at the ocean. She looked at the floor. She ran a finger over a table, checking for dust. She grimaced. Finally, the Montgomerys entered. Stan Montgomery was a large man with a face that was permanently red. He wore a linen suit that cost more than my first car. He walked in like he was doing the house a favor by existing in it. Karen Montgomery followed him. She was thin, sharp, and held her purse like a shield. She looked around the living room. Her eyes landed on my grandfather's tribal mask. She shuddered. "Oh God," she said. Her voice was shrill. "It is so dark in here. It smells like old people and spices." Stan kicked his suitcase toward my leather sofa. He didn't lift it. He kicked it. The scuff mark on the leather was visible even on the camera feed. "Well," Stan boomed. "It is smaller than Tyrell said, but I guess for a retired laborer, this is a palace." "Hey, Tyrell, get the bags from the car. Don't just stand there." Tyrell flinched. "Yes, Stan. Right away." He ran out the door like a bellhop. I watched my son humiliate himself. I watched him bow and scrape to a man who just insulted his father. Emily walked into the kitchen. She saw the wine. She picked it up and inspected the label. She laughed. A cruel, high-pitched sound. "Look at this, Mom," she called out. "He left us wine. It is from the gas station, I think. God, he is so tacky." Karen walked into the kitchen. She didn't touch the bottle. She looked at the black book on the counter. "What is this?" she asked. Emily flipped it open. "It says Guest Rules and Memories." She rolled her eyes. "He wants us to sign a guest book. Can you believe the ego? He thinks this is a historic landmark." Stan walked in. He grabbed the bottle of cheap wine and uncorked it with a violent twist. He took a swig directly from the bottle. He spat it into my sink. "Garbage," he shouted. "Pure garbage. Just like this decor." He looked at the book. "Sign the damn thing," Stan said. "Humor the old man. If we don't, Tyrell's dad might come back and lecture us." Emily pushed the book towards Stan. "Just sign it, Dad. Tyrell says his dad is obsessed with rules. If we sign it, he will leave us alone." Stan picked up the pen. He didn't read a single word. He didn't look at the fine print. He didn't see the clause about the demolition schedule or the penalty fees. He just scrawled his signature across the bottom line with a heavy, arrogant hand. Stan Montgomery. I watched on my screen. I took a sip of my whiskey. The trap was shut. The legal binding was sealed. Stan Montgomery had just rented a commercial demolition site for 30 days. He had just accepted liability for a project that had a daily operational cost of $20,000. And Tyrell, my son, was smiling as he hauled the last suitcase through the door. He thought the vacation had begun. He was wrong. The education had begun. I sat in my office chair high above the city and watched the monitors. The feed from the beach house was crisp and clear. It was 10 in the morning when the first black SUV pulled into the driveway, followed closely by a second one. They were large, aggressive vehicles that looked ridiculous parked in front of my modest wooden home. I leaned forward and took a sip of my coffee. The show was about to begin. The driver's door of the first car opened and Tyrell stepped out. My son looked frantic. He was sweating despite the cool ocean breeze. He ran around to the passenger side and opened the door with a bow that made my stomach turn. Stan Montgomery emerged. He was a large man with a face flushed red from years of expensive scotch and high blood pressure. He wore a linen suit that was already wrinkled, and he looked at my house with a sneer that twisted his entire face. "Well, this is it," Stan announced loudly, his voice booming through the audio feed. "It is smaller than the picture's Tyrell. Much smaller. It looks like a shack." Karen Montgomery stepped out of the second car. She was a thin woman with sharp features and hair that was sprayed into an immovable helmet of blonde. She held a handkerchief in her hand. I watched closely as she approached the front door. She did not touch the handle. She covered it with the handkerchief before turning it as if my home were infected with a disease. "It smells like brine and old people," Karen complained, her voice shrill and piercing. "Tyrell, did you have it cleaned professionally? I feel like I am going to catch something just standing here." Tyrell rushed forward, his head bowed low. "Yes, Karen, absolutely. I had a team come in yesterday. It is just the sea air. It is rustic." "Rustic is a word for poor people," Tyrell Stan barked. He walked to the trunk of the car and popped it open. He did not lift his own luggage. He pointed a thick finger at the bags. "Boy, get these inside. And be careful with the Louis Vuitton. It costs more than your father probably made in a year." I watched my son. I waited for him to stand up. I waited for him to say that his father was a respected engineer who had built bridges and skyscrapers. I waited for him to have a shred of dignity. But Tyrell just nodded. "Yes, Stan, right away. I will get everything. You two just go inside and relax." He hauled the heavy suitcases out of the trunk, straining under the weight. Stan and Karen did not wait for him. They walked past him without a glance, marching into my home as if they were royalty entering a stable. Stan kicked the door frame as he entered, leaving a black scuff mark on the wood I had sanded and stained with my own hands. Inside the living room, Stan looked around with open disgust. He ran a finger along the mantel of the fireplace and inspected it for dust. "Tacky," he muttered. "Look at this African junk on the walls. It looks like a museum for savages. Tyrell, get in here. Take this mask down. It is staring at me." I watched Tyrell drop the bags and rush to remove the tribal mask my grandfather had carved. He hid it behind the sofa like it was something shameful. My heart hardened into stone. My son was not just a coward. He was a collaborator. He was helping these people erase me from my own home. The camera in the kitchen picked up movement. Emily had entered. My daughter-in-law looked just as unimpressed as her parents. She was wearing heels that clicked loudly on the hardwood floor. She was not looking at the ocean view or the beautiful natural light. She was opening my cupboards and sneering at my simple plates and mugs. She spotted the welcome basket I had left on the island. I had arranged it carefully. A bag of generic potato chips, a box of store-brand crackers, and the bottle of $5 wine I had stripped of its price tag. "Oh my God, Mom, come look at this," Emily called out, her voice dripping with amusement. Karen walked into the kitchen holding her purse tight against her chest. "What is it, dear?" "Look at this generous gift," Emily said, picking up the wine bottle. She held it up to the light like she was inspecting a specimen in a lab. "No vintage, no label. I think he makes it in the bathtub. And look at these crackers. They are stale just looking at them." Karen laughed. It was a cold, dry sound. "Well, what did you expect, Emily? Tyrell said his father lives on a fixed income. He probably thought this was a luxury. It is sad, really. Poor people trying to be fancy." They both laughed then. They stood in my kitchen surrounded by the home I had built and laughed at my poverty. They had no idea that the table they were leaning on was made of imported teak worth $10,000. They had no idea that the floor they were walking on concealed a state-of-the-art heating system. They saw only what they wanted to see. An old black man with a small house and no taste. "I should throw this out," Emily said, setting the bottle down with a thud. "We cannot drink this swill. Stan would get sick." "Leave it," Karen said, waving her hand dismissively. "We can use it to clean the toilets if the maid does not show up. Where is the maid, by the way? Did Tyrell hire one?" "I doubt it." Emily sighed. "Tyrell is useless with details. I will probably have to do everything myself. Honestly, Mom, I do not know how much longer I can deal with him. If this vacation does not convince Dad to invest in Tyrell's business, I think I am done." I listened to her casual cruelty. She was talking about leaving my son while standing in his father's house, drinking his water and breathing his air, and Tyrell was outside sweating and hauling their luggage, desperate to please them. Stan walked into the kitchen then. He was holding a cigar unlit, but I knew he would light it soon despite my strict no-smoking rule. "Where is the booze?" he demanded. "I need a drink after that flight. And where is the contract? Tyrell said there was some paperwork." Emily pointed to the black leather book sitting next to the cheap wine. "This is it, Dad," she said, rolling her eyes. "It is a guest book. Can you believe it? He wants us to sign a guest book like we are staying at a bed and breakfast." Stan picked up the book. It was heavy-bound in real leather. He flipped it open roughly, bending the spine. "Guest rules and memories," he read aloud in a mocking voice. "Rule number 1, no smoking inside." "Yeah, right. Rule number 2, quiet hours after 10. Who does this guy think he is?" "The warden." He flipped to the last page where I had left a pen waiting. "Just sign it, Dad," Emily urged. "Tyrell says his dad is obsessive about his little rules. If we sign it, he will feel important and leave us alone. We do not want him coming back here to check on us." Stan grunted. He picked up the pen. He did not look at the pages in between. He did not see the dense paragraphs of legal text printed in small, sharp font. He did not see Clause 4, which stated that by signing this document, the tenant accepted full legal and financial responsibility for the property as a commercial demolition site. He did not see Clause 10, which clearly stated that any obstruction to the scheduled demolition work, which was set to begin in 10 days, would result in a penalty fee of $20,000 per hour to cover the cost of idle heavy machinery. He did not see Clause 15, which transferred all liability for environmental damages directly to the signer. Stan Montgomery saw only a nuisance. He saw a silly book from a silly old man. He pressed the pen to the paper. I leaned closer to my monitor. My breath caught in my throat. This was the moment. This was the seal on the warrant, whatever Stan muttered. Let the old man have his rules. I will run this place how I want. He scrawled his signature across the line. It was big and arrogant, taking up half the page. Stan Montgomery. He slammed the book shut and tossed the pen onto the counter. Done, he announced. Now, Tyrell, get in here and open this wine. If it is poison, I want you to taste it first. Tyrell ran into the kitchen, panting and sweating. Yes, Stan. Thank you for signing. My dad just likes to keep things orderly. Orderly, Stan scoffed. He likes to feel like he owns something. Now pour. I watched as my son opened the cheap wine and poured it into a glass for the man who despised him. I watched Stan take a sip, spit it into my sink, and curse. I sat back in my chair. The anger was gone now, replaced by a cold, hard satisfaction. They had signed. They were legally locked in. They were sitting inside a building that was scheduled to be leveled by bulldozers, and they had just agreed to pay the bill for the wreckage. Stan lit his cigar and blew a cloud of thick gray smoke into my kitchen. "Let the vacation begin," he laughed. I took a sip of my own coffee. "Yes, Stan," I whispered to the empty room. "Let it begin. Enjoy the view while it lasts, because the bill is coming, and you are not going to believe the price." By the third day, the novelty of the ocean view had worn off, and the silence of the house had begun to itch at the Montgomerys like a cheap wool sweater. I watched from my office in the city as the boredom set in. They had consumed the generic potato chips. They had complained about the lack of cable television. Now they were pacing the floors of my sanctuary looking for something to entertain them. It had started in the master bedroom. I had locked my personal closet, but I had left the drawers of the dresser unlocked because they contained only old linens and a few spare work shirts. I watched Karen Montgomery walk into the room with a glass of water in her hand, not bothering to use a coaster. She opened the top drawer. She ran her manicured fingers over my flannel shirts. She pulled one out and held it up with 2 fingers as if it were a dead rat. "Look at this, Stan," she called out. Her voice was tinny through the speakers. "Polyester blends and flannel. He really does dress like a lumberjack. I bet he bought these at a thrift store." Stan walked in. He was wearing shorts and a polo shirt that was unbuttoned too far down his chest. He looked sweaty and irritable. "Who cares about his clothes, Karen?" he grunted. "I am looking for the good stuff. Every old man has a stash. Cash, whiskey, something." He did not leave us anything to drink except that vinegar in the kitchen. He began to pull open the drawers of my nightstand. He rummaged through my reading glasses and my notepads. He tossed them onto the floor without a second thought. He was hunting. He was a predator in a space that did not belong to him, and he felt entitled to everything he found. "There has to be a safe," Stan muttered, "or a hidden cabinet. People like this do not trust banks. They stuff money in the walls." I watched him move to my bookshelf. He pulled down books I had collected for 40 years. First editions of engineering texts. Biographies of great architects. He shook them, hoping money would fall out. When nothing did, he tossed the books onto the rug, bending the covers. My hands gripped the edge of my desk. These were not guests. They were invaders. They were stripping my home of its dignity, layer by layer. They were violating my privacy with a casual arrogance that made my blood run cold. They assumed that because I was a black man living in a wooden house, I must be hiding cash because I could not possibly have a diversified portfolio or a digital bank account. Stan moved to the hallway. He stopped in front of the heavy oak door at the far end. This was the only room I had secured with a deadbolt. I had placed a strip of red industrial tape across the frame at eye level. On the tape, I had written in black marker, "Technical area authorized personnel only." It was a warning. It was a boundary. To Stan Montgomery, it was an invitation. He stood in front of the door, his hands on his hips. "Here it is," he announced. "This is where he keeps it." Emily walked down the hall, filing her nails. "Keeps what?" "Dad," she asked, bored. "The liquor," Stan said. "Or the good cigars. Or maybe the cash. Why else would he lock it and put up this ridiculous sign?" "Technical area. Please. He probably has a TV in there he does not want us to use." Tyrell came out of the kitchen. He looked tired. He had spent the last 2 days cooking and cleaning for them while they criticized his efforts. "Stan, maybe we should leave that alone," Tyrell said weakly. "Dad said it was for maintenance. It might be the boiler or something." "Do not be an idiot," Stan snapped. "Boilers are in the basement. This is a stash room. Your father is holding out on us. Go get me a screwdriver. I am not sure we should." Tyrell started. "I said get me a screwdriver," Stan roared. "Or do you want me to call my broker and tell him your business idea is a waste of time?" Tyrell froze. He looked at the door, then at Stan. He hung his head. "I will check the tool drawer," he whispered. I watched my son hand the weapon to the man who was robbing him of his inheritance. Stan took the flathead screwdriver. He did not try to pick the lock. He jammed the metal tip into the wood frame between the door and the jamb. He leaned his weight into it. The wood groaned. I flinched as if he were prying at my own ribs. He was destroying the frame. He was gouging the oak I had installed 30 years ago. Cheap lock. Stan grunted, sweating with exertion. Just like everything else in this dump. He pushed harder. There was a loud crack as the wood splintered. The deadbolt popped free from the ruined frame. The door swung inward. Bingo, Stan shouted. He threw the screwdriver onto the floor and stepped over the red tape, breaking the seal. I leaned forward in my chair. My heart was hammering a slow, heavy rhythm. Stan thought he was walking into a pantry full of Hennessy. He thought he was going to find a shoebox full of 20s. He was wrong. He stepped into the room. Karen and Emily crowded behind him. Tyrell lingered in the hallway, too afraid to look. The room was cool. The air conditioning was set to 68 degrees to protect the contents. In the center of the room, on a large drafting table, stood a massive architectural model. It was 6 feet by 4 feet. It was a perfect miniature replica of the Blue Horizon Resort, the project that would replace this very house. It had tiny palm trees, working LED lights, and a glass lobby that sparkled. It was a masterpiece of design. It was the physical manifestation of my life's work. And on a small pedestal in the corner sat a framed photograph of Sarah. It was taken the day we bought this land. She was laughing, her hair blowing in the wind. Next to the photo was a small vase with a single dried white rose, the last one she ever gave me. Stan stared at the room. He blinked. His face went purple. "What is this garbage?" he yelled. He walked up to the model. He did not see the genius of the design. He did not see the $50 million project. He saw a toy. "It is a dollhouse," he spat. He locked up a damn dollhouse. He looked around frantically. He opened the cabinets under the drafting table. They were full of blueprints and permits. No liquor, no cash. He turned to the corner. He saw the shrine to my wife. He walked over to it. He picked up the photo of Sarah. He looked at it with pure contempt. "This is it," he said. "This is the big secret. A picture of his dead wife in a toy hotel. What a senile old fool." He tossed the photo back onto the table, but he threw it too hard. It slid across the polished surface and fell off the edge. The glass shattered on the floor. I stopped breathing. The sound of that breaking glass cut through the audio feed and pierced my chest. Stan looked down at the broken frame. He did not flinch. He did not apologize. He lifted his foot and kicked the frame aside, sending it skittering into the wall. "Useless junk," he muttered. "Come on, Karen. There is nothing here. Just old man trash." He turned back to the architectural model. He was angry now. Angry that he had not found what he wanted. He made a fist and pounded it onto the delicate roof of the miniature resort lobby. The plastic crunched. The structure collapsed under his heavy hand. "Oops," he laughed cruelly. "Guess the construction was cheap too." He walked out of the room, leaving the door hanging off its hinges, the model crushed, and Sarah's photo lying in the shards of glass. I sat in my penthouse. The silence in my office was heavy. They had broken the house. That was just wood and plaster. I could forgive that. They had broken the contract. That was just business. I could profit from that. But Stan Montgomery had looked at the face of the woman I loved, the woman who had built me up from nothing, and he had called her trash. He had kicked her memory across the floor. That was not business. That was war. I picked up my phone. I dialed the number for my private contractor, the man who managed the site utilities remotely. "Mr. Turner," he answered. "Cut it," I said. My voice was ice. "Sir," he asked. "Cut the water," I commanded. "Cut it all. Main line, reserve tank, everything. I want that house dry as a bone in 5 minutes." "Yes, sir." I hung up. I looked at the screen. Stan was walking back to the living room, wiping his hands on his pants. He thought he was just dealing with a disappointing rental. He thought he was the king of the castle. He did not know that the siege had just begun. He did not know that in 5 minutes he would not be able to flush a toilet or wash his hands. I watched Sarah's photo lying on the floor of the forbidden room. "I am sorry, Sarah," I whispered, "but they are going to pay for that. They are going to pay for every single piece of glass." The scream that echoed through the house was not one of fear, but of pure, unadulterated rage. I watched on my monitor as Karen Montgomery stumbled out of the bathroom wrapped in a towel that was barely holding together. Her hair was covered in thick white foam. Her face was red, and her eyes were squeezed shut against the sting of expensive shampoo. "There is no water," she shrieked. Her voice cracked the air like a whip. "I am covered in soap and the water just stopped. Who turned it off?" She marched into the living room, leaving a trail of soapy water on my hardwood floors. Stan looked up from the sofa where he had been nursing a glass of the cheap wine because there was nothing else to drink. "What are you yelling about, Karen?" he grunted. The water, Stan? She screamed. It cut out. Right in the middle of my shower. My eyes are burning. Do something. Stan stood up. He looked at Tyrell, who was in the kitchen trying to salvage the mood by arranging store-brand crackers on a plate. Tyrell Stan barked. What is going on with this house? First the internet is slow, now the water is gone. Did your father forget to pay the bill? Tyrell rushed forward, his hands trembling. I do not know, Stan. It should be working. Let me check the sink. He turned the faucet handle. Nothing came out. Not a drop. Just the hollow, dry sound of pipes gasping for air. It must be a city thing, Tyrell stammered. Maybe a main break. A city thing, Karen yelled, wiping soap from her eyes. Look outside, Tyrell. I can see the neighbor watering his lawn. His sprinklers are on full blast. It is just this house. This cheap, broken-down shack. She turned on Tyrell, her face twisted with disdain. You brought us here, she hissed. You promised us a luxury vacation, and now I'm standing here blind and sticky in a house that does not even have basic utilities. Is this how your father lives? Is he destitute? Tyrell looked like he wanted to disappear into the floorboards. I will call him, he said, pulling out his phone. I will call him right now. He must know what to do. I watched on my screen as my phone lit up on my desk. The name Tyrell flashed against the background photo of Sarah. I did not reach for it. I let it ring. I took a slow sip of my whiskey and listened to the desperate buzzing sound. He is not answering, Tyrell said, his voice rising in panic. It is going to voicemail. Of course, he is not answering. Stan shouted. He is probably dodging collectors. People like him do not pay bills, Tyrell. They bounce checks and run away. That is why he left in such a hurry. He knew they were coming to cut the water. Stan walked over to Tyrell and poked him hard in the chest. You fix this, boy, he growled. I do not care how you do it. Get the water back on, or you can forget about that investment. You can forget about everything. I watched my son scramble. He was terrified. He believed them. He believed I was a deadbeat who could not keep the lights on. He had no faith in me, no respect. I will call a plumber, Tyrell said, backing away. I will pay for it myself. Just give me an hour. Please. Karen stormed back toward the bathroom, muttering curses. I hope you have bottled water, Tyrell, because I am going to rinse this off with whatever I can find. And you are buying me more Evian. I sat back in my chair. The water was just the beginning. The house was smart. It was connected. And it was angry. 30 minutes later, a white van pulled into the driveway. It was a local handyman service, not a licensed contractor. Tyrell had clearly called the first number he found on Google. A man in blue coveralls hopped out holding a toolbox. I switched the camera feed to the front porch audio. Tyrell met the man at the door. Thank God you are here, he said. The water is completely dead. We need it back on immediately. I will pay extra for a rush job. The handyman nodded. No problem, boss. Let me just check the meter and the main valve. Probably just a stuck valve or a city lock. He walked around the side of the house to the utility panel. I had installed a digital lock on the panel years ago, but I had also installed a permanent metal plaque on the front. It was red. It had the logo of my holding company, Turner Group, and a warning that read, Property under corporate management, unauthorized access prohibited. I watched the handyman kneel down. He took out a wrench. Then he saw the plaque. He stopped. He froze. He leaned in closer to read the small print. He stood up very quickly. He backed away from the panel as if it were a bomb. Whoa, he said loud enough for the microphone to catch. No way. No way am I touching this. Tyrell ran over to him. What is it? What is wrong? Can you fix it? The handyman looked at Tyrell with wide eyes. He looked scared. Do you know whose house this is, buddy? He asked. It is my father's house, Tyrell said, confused. Caleb Turner. The handyman shook his head. The sign says Turner Group. That is the massive conglomerate downtown. They own half the coastline. They are ruthless, man. They sue people for breathing on their property. This is a red property. That means it is flagged for high-level corporate development. Tyrell laughed nervously. You are mistaken. My dad is just a retired engineer. He does not own a conglomerate. He probably just owes them money. Maybe they put a lien on the house. The handyman backed up toward his van. Look, I do not care what your dad told you. I know that logo. I know that name. If I touch a valve on a Turner Group red property, I lose my license. I lose my business. They have lawyers that eat guys like me for lunch. But we have no water, Tyrell pleaded. Not my problem, the man said, climbing into his van. And if I were you, I would not touch it either. If the Turner Group cut your water, it means you are in deep trouble. Those guys do not play games. He slammed the door and peeled out of the driveway, leaving Tyrell standing in the dust. My son stood there staring at the red plaque. He did not see the truth. He did not see that his father was the titan the handyman feared. He saw what he wanted to see. He walked back into the house, his face pale. Stan met him in the hallway. "Well, is it fixed?" "No," Tyrell whispered. The guy left. He said he would not touch it. "Stan, there is a sign on the utility box. It says Turner Group." Stan frowned. "Who is the Turner Group?" Tyrell swallowed hard. "I think it is a loan shark agency. Or maybe a collection firm." The guy was terrified. He said Dad is in deep trouble. He said this is a flagged property. Stan laughed. A cruel barking sound. "I knew it," he shouted. "I knew it. Your father is a crook. He is up to his neck in debt and he pawned this house off on us to hide out. That is why he left. He is running from the mob, Tyrell." Emily walked in, drying her hands on a paper towel. "Great," she said. "Just great. So we are staying in a house that has been seized by criminals. My husband brought me to a foreclosure." "It is not a foreclosure," Tyrell tried to argue. "It is just a misunderstanding." "It is pathetic," Stan interrupted. "Your father is a loser, Tyrell, and the apple does not fall far from the tree. Move aside." Stan pushed past Tyrell. He marched toward the back door. "Where are you going?" Karen asked, coming down the stairs in a dry dress, her hair still wet and matted. "I am going to fix it myself," Stan announced. "I am not afraid of some collection agency sign. I know how plumbing works. It is just a valve. I am going to turn it back on, and then I am going to drink the rest of that terrible wine." "Stan, you should not," Tyrell warned. "The guy said it was dangerous." "Shut up," Tyrell Stan snapped. "You are useless. Let a real man handle this." I watched Stan march out to the utility panel. He did not have a wrench. He had a hammer he had found in the kitchen drawer and a pair of pliers. He approached the panel. He saw the red plaque. He spat on it. "Turner Group," he muttered. "Bunch of suits." He jammed the pliers into the lock of the utility box. He twisted. The metal groaned. He hit the latch with the hammer. Once, twice. The lock broke. The door of the panel swung open. Inside, it was not just a water valve. It was the central nervous system of the house. It was a complex array of circuit breakers, digital relays, and fiber optic cables that controlled everything from the water pressure to the security sensors. Stan did not know what he was looking at. He saw a handle painted blue and assumed it was the water. He reached for it, but in his clumsiness, his other hand brushed against the main power bus for the smart home server. I had designed that system myself. It carried a high voltage load to power the perimeter lights and the server cooling fans. Stan grabbed the water valve with the pliers and yanked it. The valve broke. Water sprayed out, hitting the exposed electrical bus. The sound was deafening. A massive arc of blue electricity snapped through the air. It sounded like a gunshot. Stan was thrown backward. He landed hard in the dirt, screaming. Smoke poured out of the utility box. The smell of frying ozone and melting plastic filled the air. Inside the house, the lights flickered violently. The refrigerator groaned and died. The hum of the air conditioning stopped instantly. Total silence. Total darkness. I watched on my battery-powered backup camera feed. The image switched to night vision, grainy and green. Stan was lying on the ground, groaning, holding his arm. Karen screamed from inside the house. "Stan, Stan." "What happened?" Tyrell ran out the back door. He found his father-in-law covered in soot, smelling of burnt hair. "I think I killed it," Stan wheezed, coughing. "I think I killed the whole house." "You idiot," Tyrell whispered. He was staring at the smoking box. "You fried the mainframe." Stan sat up. He looked at the house. It was a dark, silent tomb against the evening sky. "Do not call me an idiot, boy," he snarled. "This is your father's fault. His wiring is faulty. It is a death trap. I am going to sue him. I am going to sue him for everything he has." I sat in my office. I took another sip of whiskey. "Sue me, Stan," I said to the screen. "Please try. You just destroyed a $200,000 custom smart grid, and you did it while trespassing in a locked utility panel." I checked the logs on my laptop. The system was dead. The water was off. The power was gone. They were alone in the dark in a house that was rapidly becoming a prison. And the best part was that the security cameras were running on independent batteries. I would not miss a single second of their misery. Tyrell helped Stan to his feet. They stumbled back into the dark house. "What do we do now?" Emily asked, her voice trembling in the dark. "Now," Stan said, coughing smoke. "Now we light some candles. We open the windows. And we finish the wine. We are not leaving. I am not letting your father's incompetence ruin my vacation." They were stubborn. I had to give them that. They were willing to sit in the dark and smell their own filth just to prove a point. But they did not know that the environmental sensors had just been triggered by the smoke. And they did not know that the next wave of my attack was not going to come from the house. It was going to come from the city. I picked up my phone and dialed the number for the local Environmental Protection Office. "Hello," I said. "I would like to report a hazardous chemical discharge at a beachfront property. Yes, smoke and potential fluid leak. It is right next to the turtle sanctuary." I hung up. "The lights might be out, Stan, but the spotlight is about to be on you." The silence of the blackout did not last long. By noon the next day, the peaceful sound of the waves crashing against the shore was shattered by the mechanical roar of a diesel generator. I watched from my office monitor as a delivery truck dumped the massive yellow machine onto my front lawn, crushing a bed of native coastal flowers I had spent 3 years cultivating. Stan Montgomery stood on the porch with a cigar clamped between his teeth, directing the workers with wild gestures. He looked like a general commanding a retreat. He was not going to let a little thing like a total power failure stop him from showing off. He had rented the generator with a rush delivery fee that was likely astronomical, but Stan did not care about costs. He cared about appearances. He ran thick orange extension cords through my open windows, snaking them across my hardwood floors like ugly veins. The generator sputtered and coughed black smoke into the pristine sea air, but the lights inside the house flickered back on. The refrigerator hummed to life. Stan threw his hands up in victory. He turned to Tyrell, who was sweeping up the debris from the electrical explosion, and shouted, "See, boy, that is how you solve a problem. You do not call a handyman. You buy the power yourself." But Stan was not content with just having the lights on. He needed an audience. He needed witnesses to his triumph over the adversity of my cheap house. I listened as he made phone calls, his voice booming over the rumble of the generator. He called his golf buddies. He called his business rivals. He told them all to come down to Malibu. He told them he was throwing an impromptu housewarming party. "Come see the place," he shouted into his phone. "It is a little rustic right now. We are doing some renovations on the grid, but the view is $1 million. Yeah, I bought it for the kids. Wanted to give them a start. You know how it is." I gripped my coffee mug. He was lying. He was telling everyone that he had bought my house. He was claiming ownership of my life's work. He was erasing me completely, replacing my name on the deed with his own in the minds of his social circle. And Tyrell stood right there listening to the lie and saying absolutely nothing. My son wiped the soot from his face and nodded like a good servant. He was letting this man steal his father's dignity just to keep the peace. By sunset, the driveway was full of cars. They were not rentals. They were Porsches and Mercedes, driven by men who wore loafers without socks and women who wore jewelry that cost more than college tuitions. They spilled into my house like a swarm of locusts. They did not wipe their feet. They did not respect the space. They treated my home like a frat house for the elderly and wealthy. Stan held court in the living room. He had opened the rest of the windows to let out the cigar smoke, but the air was thick with the smell of expensive cologne and entitlement. He poured drinks from bottles his friends had brought. He laughed loudly, slapping backs and shaking hands. "Yeah, it needs work," Stan bragged, gesturing around the room with a lit cigarette. "We are going to gut it. Tear down these wooden walls, put in some marble, maybe a glass elevator." The previous owner was some retired laborer, had no vision. "But we are going to fix it up for Tyrell and Emily." I watched a woman in a red dress drop a canapé on my Persian rug. She looked down at the smear of grease and, laughing, kicked it under the sofa with her heel. That rug was a gift from a diplomat I had worked with in Dubai. It was woven by hand. Now it was a napkin for a woman who did not know its value. Another man tapped his cigar ash onto my windowsill. The wind caught the embers and blew them onto the curtains. Emily rushed over to brush them off, but the man just waved her away. "Relax, honey," he said. "Your dad said you are gutting the place anyway. Let it burn a little. Gives it character." The party moved to the balcony. The sun was going down, painting the sky in violets and oranges. It was a breathtaking sight, the kind that usually made people quiet and reflective. But these people were not wired for reflection. They were wired for consumption. They leaned over the railing, shouting over the sound of the ocean. They toasted to Stan's generosity. They toasted to the new house. Then the destruction began in earnest. It started with a beer bottle. A man finished his drink, and instead of finding a trash can, he simply tossed the glass bottle over the railing. I watched it arc through the air and crash onto the rocks below. "Target practice!" the man shouted, laughing. Stan laughed with him. He grabbed an empty wine bottle. "Watch this," he said. He threw the bottle. It shattered on the rocks, sending shards of green glass scattering across the sand. The guests cheered. It became a game. They began to throw everything they could find: plastic cups, paper plates, half-eaten food, cans. They rained garbage down onto the beach below. My stomach twisted. They did not know what was down there. They did not know that the stretch of beach directly below my house was a federally protected nesting ground for sea turtles. I had spent years working with local conservationists to keep that sand pristine. I had fought the city to prevent streetlights from confusing the hatchlings. I had treated that beach like holy ground. And now Stan Montgomery and his friends were burying it in trash. I watched a woman throw a lit cigarette butt over the edge. It landed in a patch of dry seagrass. That was enough. I had seen enough. I picked up my phone. I did not call the police. The police would just give them a warning for a noise complaint. I called the number for the California Coastal Commission Enforcement Division. I had the direct line to the regional director, a woman named Sarah, who took her job very seriously. "Hello, Sarah," I said. "This is Caleb Turner. Yes, I am watching a live feed of my property. There is a group of people dumping glass and burning waste directly into the turtle sanctuary. Yes, active dumping. It is a biohazard. Send the heavy unit." I hung up. I watched the screen. Stan was winding up to throw a heavy glass decanter he had taken from my study. He looked like a pitcher on the mound. He threw it. It smashed loudly below. He took a bow while his friends applauded. "Enjoy the applause, Stan," I whispered. "It is going to cost you." 20 minutes later, the party was interrupted not by a doorbell, but by a siren that cut through the noise of the generator like a knife. Blue and red lights flashed against the living room walls. The laughter died instantly. 3 vehicles pulled into the driveway, blocking the Porsches and the Mercedes. They were not patrol cars. They were enforcement trucks with the emblem of the Department of Fish and Wildlife and the Environmental Protection Agency. 6 officers stepped out. They were not smiling. They were wearing tactical vests and carrying heavy flashlights. They marched to the front door. Stan stumbled to the door, a drink in his hand. "What is the meaning of this?" he demanded, slurring his words. "This is a private party." The lead officer, a man with a face like granite, shone his flashlight directly into Stan's eyes. "Sir, we have video evidence of illegal dumping of hazardous materials into a protected marine sanctuary. We have reports of glass, plastic, and incendiary devices being thrown onto a federal nesting ground." Stan blinked, blinded by the light. "That is ridiculous," he stammered. "We are just having a little fun. It is my property. I can do what I want." The officer stepped closer. "This property is part of the Malibu Coastal Conservation Zone. Throwing refuse onto the beach is a felony. Disturbing a turtle nesting ground carries a mandatory federal fine. We are going to need to see identification from the property owner immediately." The guests began to back away. The party was over. The smell of fear replaced the smell of cologne. They knew that an environmental crime was not something they could bribe their way out of. Stan looked around. The arrogance drained out of him. He realized he was in trouble. He realized that claiming ownership of the house meant claiming ownership of the crime. He looked at the officer. He looked at his friends who were watching him. He looked at Tyrell, who was standing in the corner holding a tray of appetizers. Stan pointed a shaking finger at Tyrell. "I am not the owner," he said, his voice cracking. "He is." He pointed at my son. The man he had just spent hours humiliating. The man he had told everyone was a charity case. "This is Tyrell Turner." Stan lied. "It is his house. I am just a guest. He is the one responsible for the property. He should have told us about the turtles." Tyrell dropped the tray. The sound of silver hitting the floor echoed in the silence. Tyrell whispered, "You told everyone it was your house. You threw the bottles." Stan turned on him, his face twisting into a mask of cruelty. "Do not lie, boy. I was just trying to be nice to your friends. This is your mess. You deal with it." Officer, talk to him. "He is the one you want." The officer looked at Tyrell. "Sir, are you the owner of record?" Tyrell looked at Stan. He looked at Emily, who was hiding behind her mother, refusing to make eye contact. He was alone. He realized that the family he was trying so hard to impress would throw him to the wolves the second it became convenient. I am the tenant's son, Tyrell stammered. My father owns the house, the officer nodded. Since your father is not here and you are the primary occupant, you are liable for the immediate citation. We are issuing a Tier 1 environmental violation. The fine is $50,000. It is payable immediately or you will be taken into custody for processing. $50,000. The room gasped. Tyrell turned pale. I do not have $50,000. Stan stepped forward. He put a heavy hand on Tyrell's shoulder. He leaned in close, his voice a hiss. Pay it, Tyrell. Use a credit card. Do whatever you have to do. If you let me get arrested, if you let this ruin my reputation, I swear I will destroy you. I will make sure you never work in this town again, and Emily will leave you before the sun comes up. Tyrell looked at Emily. She did not defend him. She just nodded, mouthing the word pay. My son reached into his pocket. His hands were shaking so badly he could barely hold his wallet. He pulled out a credit card. It was a black card. It was the card I had given him for emergencies. The card he thought was his, but was actually linked to my secondary account. I watched on the screen. I knew the limit on that card. I knew the balance. I had been paying it off for 3 years, keeping him afloat. But this morning, before I left the city, I had lowered the limit. I had dropped it to exactly $51,000. Tyrell handed the card to the officer. Please, he whispered, just take it. The officer ran the card through a portable terminal. We all waited. Stan wiped sweat from his forehead. The guests held their breath. The machine beeped. Approved. Tyrell let out a breath he had been holding. Stan clapped him on the back hard. Good boy, Stan said loudly, regaining his composure. That is how you handle business. Now, officer, get off my property. Or I mean, get off his property. The officer handed Tyrell a long receipt. This is just the preliminary fine, sir. You will receive a summons for the court date regarding the damages. Clean this mess up. If we find one more bottle cap on that beach, we are condemning the house. The police left. The guests fled immediately afterward, muttering excuses about early mornings and babysitters. They did not want to be associated with the disaster. Within 10 minutes, the house was empty except for the family. Stan flopped onto the sofa. He picked up his drink. What a nightmare, he complained. Your father's neighbors are snitches, Tyrell. Who calls the EPA on a party? Tyrell stood in the middle of the room holding the $50,000 receipt. He looked at it. He looked at Stan. You owe me $50,000, Stan Tyrell said, his voice trembling. I just maxed out my card. That was everything I had. Stan laughed. He waved his hand dismissively. Relax, kid. Consider it an investment. You saved the family name. I will pay you back when the market turns. Or maybe we will just deduct it from the rent you owe me for marrying my daughter. He laughed again. Emily giggled nervously. I sat in my office. I watched Tyrell stare at his wife and his father-in-law. I saw the first crack in his delusion. He was beginning to see them. He was beginning to see that to them he was not a person. He was a wallet. He was a shield. And he did not know that the card he just used was about to trigger a fraud alert on my phone. He did not know that by signing that receipt, he had just legally accepted responsibility for the property. He had just put his name on the disaster. I closed my laptop. The party was over. The guests were gone. But the bill was just starting to be calculated. And Stan Montgomery still had 25 days left on his lease. I picked up the phone again. I called Mr. Roth, my lawyer. It is done, I said. They admitted liability. They paid the fine. Now send the eviction notice for the main residence in Chicago. Stan thought he had dodged a bullet. He did not know the gun was pointed at his own house. I watched the aftermath of the party from my office screen. The house was quiet now, but it was the silence of a crime scene. The smell of stale beer and burnt carpet seemed to seep through the monitor. Tyrell sat at the kitchen table, holding his head in his hands. His phone was on the table in front of him. I knew what he was looking at. He was looking at his banking app. He was looking at a balance that was deep in the red. The $50,000 fine had not just maxed out the card I gave him. It had triggered penalty fees and overdraft notifications on his personal accounts linked to it. He was drowning. Stan had gone to bed hours ago, leaving Tyrell to clean up the mess. But Tyrell was not cleaning. He was panicking. He stood up and began to pace the room. He was muttering to himself. I turned up the audio gain. 50,000, he whispered. I do not have 50,000. Stan is going to kill me. Emily is going to leave me. He stopped pacing. He looked toward the hallway, toward the master bedroom and the study next to it. I saw a thought form in his mind. It was a desperate, ugly thought implanted by Stan Montgomery, the stash. Stan had insisted that I was a hoarder, that I kept cash in the walls, that I was hiding money. Tyrell had defended me then, but now desperation had warped his memory. He needed to believe it was true. He needed his father to be a miser hiding a fortune in a shoebox so he could steal it and save himself. I watched my son walk down the hallway. He moved like a thief in his own childhood home. He tried the handle of my study door. It was locked. I had locked it before I left, not to hide money, but to protect my current work. Tyrell did not hesitate. He went to the garage and came back with a crowbar. He did not care about the wood. He did not care about the house. He jammed the metal claw into the frame and heaved. The wood splintered with a dry snap. The door swung open. He rushed inside. He did not turn on the light, fearing it might wake Stan. He used the flashlight on his phone. The beam cut through the darkness, highlighting dust motes dancing in the stale air. He began to tear the room apart. He pulled books off the shelves, shaking them, hoping bills would flutter out. He opened my desk drawers and dumped the contents onto the floor. Pens, paper clips, old receipts. Nothing of value. He fell to his knees, checking under the rug. He tapped on the walls, looking for a hollow sound. Nothing. He sat back on his heels, breathing hard. He looked like a cornered animal. "Come on, Dad," he hissed. "Where is it? You have to have something. You never spent money on anything. Where did it go?" He stood up and went to the large flat file cabinet in the corner. It was where I kept my architectural drawings. He yanked the top drawer open. He froze. He did not find stacks of cash. He found paper. Large, heavy sheets of vellum and blueprint paper. He pulled one out. He unrolled it on the desk, holding the corners down with trembling hands. It was the schematic for the Zenith Tower, the tallest building in the city. A building Tyrell walked past every day on his way to his mediocre job. He shone his light on the bottom right corner. The title block: Lead Structural Engineer Caleb Turner, Chief Architect Caleb Turner. He blinked. He dropped the paper and pulled out another. The Bay Bridge Retrofitting Project. Lead Engineer Caleb Turner. The New City Stadium. Project Director Caleb Turner. My son stared at the documents, his mouth opened slightly. He had always thought I was a construction worker, maybe a foreman. He thought I poured concrete and hammered nails. He never asked. He never looked. He assumed my calloused hands meant low wages. He did not know I owned the concrete company. He did not know I designed the steel skeletons that held the city together. He was looking at a legacy he had been too arrogant to see. Emily appeared in the doorway. She was wearing a silk robe and looked annoyed. "Tyrell, what are you doing?" she whispered harshly. "You are making so much noise. Did you find anything?" Tyrell looked up at her. He looked dazed. "Emily, look at this," he said, pointing to the blueprints. "My dad. He built the Zenith Tower. He built the stadium." Emily walked over. She did not look at the drawings. She was not interested in architecture. She began to rifle through the other papers on the desk, pushing aside the blueprints I had spent years perfecting. "Who cares what he built?" "Tyrell," she snapped. "Did he get paid for it? That is the question. Where is the money?" She shoved a stack of file folders aside. A thick cream-colored envelope fell to the floor. It had the logo of the Switzerland Private Bank embossed in gold on the front. Emily snatched it up. It was already open. I had left it there. It was a quarterly statement for the Turner Family Trust. She pulled out the letter. Her eyes scanned the page. Her breath hitched. "Oh my God," she gasped. "What?" Tyrell asked, standing up. She turned the paper toward him. Her fingers shook as she pointed to the balance. $10 million, she whispered. "Tyrell, your father has $10 million in a liquid trust fund." Tyrell grabbed the paper. He stared at the numbers. He counted the zeros. $10 million, he repeated. "He is sitting on $10 million, and he let me drive a leased car. He let me struggle with rent. He let me pay that fine today." Greed washed over his face, erasing the shock. He did not feel pride in my success. He felt cheated. He felt that this money had been stolen from him. "Read the rest," Emily said, snatching the paper back. "Look at the beneficiary." Tyrell looked. Under the line for primary beneficiary, it did not say Tyrell Turner. It said, "The Sarah Turner Foundation for Urban Development." Tyrell's face went slack. "He is giving it away," he whispered. "He is giving it all away to some charity named after Mom. He cut me out." Emily looked at him with pure venom. "He did not just cut you out, Tyrell. He played you. He sat in this house pretending to be poor, watching us struggle and laughing. He has $10 million, and he gave us a bottle of $5 wine. She threw the paper onto the desk. He is sick, she spat. He is a sick, twisted old man. Just then, heavy footsteps echoed in the hall. Stan Montgomery appeared in the doorway. He was wearing his pajamas and he looked groggy, but the mention of $10 million had sharpened his senses instantly. "What is this about $10 million?" Stan demanded, stepping into the room. Emily picked up the bank statement and handed it to her father. "Look, Stan, Tyrell's dad, the poor, retired laborer. He is a multi-millionaire, and he is hiding it all in a trust fund for a charity." Stan took the paper. He read it. He looked at the blueprint spread out on the desk. He looked at the name Caleb Turner on the Zenith Tower schematics. His face changed. The disdain he usually held for me evaporated, replaced by a hungry, predatory glint. He did not look surprised. He looked calculating. "Well, well," Stan murmured. "The old man is a fox. A sly old fox." He looked at Tyrell. "You told me he was nobody," Stan said accusingly. "You told me he was a nobody with a beach shack." "I did not know," Tyrell stammered. "He never told me. He drives a truck, Stan. He wears flannel. He is eccentric," Karen said from the hallway. She had arrived quietly, drawn by the commotion. "That explains the weird art. He is one of those eccentric geniuses." She walked in and looked at the bank statement over Stan's shoulder. $10 million, she said, licking her lips. "And that is just the cash. Imagine the assets, the portfolio." She looked around the room with new eyes. Suddenly the house was not a shack. It was the eccentric hideaway of a wealthy recluse. "But he is giving it away," Emily whined. "It says right there, the Sarah Turner Foundation. He is going to waste it on building parks for poor people or something. It is not fair. That is our money. Tyrell is his only son." Stan lowered the paper slowly. He looked at the group. He took charge. "He is not giving it away," Stan said firmly. "Not if we have anything to say about it." "What can we do?" Tyrell asked. "It is his money." "Is it?" Stan asked. He looked at the blueprints, then at the broken door, then at the chaos of the room. "Think about it, Tyrell. A man with $10 million living like this, hiding his past, ignoring his family, hoarding wealth while his son suffers. Does that sound like a sane man to you?" Tyrell frowned. "What are you saying?" "I am saying," Stan continued, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, "that your father is obviously not in his right mind. This kind of behavior, the secrecy, the hoarding, the paranoia about the rules in that guestbook, it is classic dementia, or maybe schizophrenia." He tapped the bank statement with a thick finger. "He is a danger to himself," Stan said, "and he is a danger to his estate. Leaving $10 million to a charity nobody has ever heard of. That is reckless. It is a sign of cognitive decline." Karen nodded vigorously. "Stan is right. No normal father would do that. He must be confused. He probably forgot he even has a son." Emily looked at Tyrell. Her eyes were wide and bright. "Tyrell, if he is sick, we have a duty to help him. We have a duty to step in." Tyrell looked at the papers. He looked at the family that had humiliated him just hours before. He saw a way back in. He saw a way to be the hero. He saw a way to get the money. "You mean guardianship?" Tyrell whispered. "Conservatorship," Stan corrected. "Full financial and medical control. If we can prove he is mentally incompetent, we can freeze that trust. We can take control of the assets before he flushes them down the toilet." "But he seemed fine on the phone," Tyrell said weakly. "He was sharp." "That is part of the disease," Stan countered. "They have moments of clarity. But look at this room, Tyrell. Look at the way he lives. It is not normal. We need to save him from himself." Stan smiled. It was a shark smiling at a seal. "And we need to protect your inheritance, boy. That money belongs to this family. To us." Karen put a hand on Tyrell's arm. "We can help you, Tyrell. We know lawyers. We know doctors. We can get this sorted out. We just need to show that he is unstable." Emily picked up the blueprints. "We can say he is obsessed with the past," she suggested. "That he thinks he is still building skyscrapers. That he is living in a fantasy world." Tyrell looked at the plans. He looked at his name not listed on the trust. He hardened his heart. "You are right," he said. "He has to be sick. No father would do this to his son if he were sane." Stan clapped his hands together. "Exactly. Now here is what we do. We do not leave. We stay right here. We document everything. Every weird thing he does, every piece of junk he collects. We build a case. He looked at the bank statement one last time. $10 million, Stan whispered. We are going to need a bigger boat. I watched from my office. I listened to them plot to strip me of my rights. I listened to them twist my life's work into a symptom of madness. They thought they had found a gold mine. They did not know they had just armed a nuclear warhead. Stan wanted to prove I was dangerous. He wanted to prove I was unstable. I reached for my phone. I opened the app for the demolition schedule. The heavy machinery was parked 5 miles away. The permit was valid starting at 6 a.m. tomorrow morning. Stan wanted a crazy old man. I was going to give him a demolition expert. I texted Mr. Roth, my lawyer. They found the bait, I wrote. They took it hook, line, and sinker. Proceed with the eviction notice, and tell the foreman to warm up the engines. Tomorrow morning, Stan Montgomery was going to learn that the only thing unstable about this property was the ground he was standing on. The meeting in my dining room looked less like a family gathering and more like a war council. I sat in my office 20 miles away staring at the high-definition monitor, but I felt like I was in the room with them breathing in their greed. Stan Montgomery sat at the head of the table, my table. He had spread out the bank statement, the blueprints, and a legal pad. Karen sat to his right, holding a glass of wine she had poured from a bottle they had brought with them, finally accepting that my cellar was empty. Emily was pacing. Tyrell sat slumped in a chair looking at his hands. We have to move fast, Stan said. His voice was low and serious. If Caleb comes back and sees we found the papers, he might hide the money again. We need legal standing. We need to be his guardians before he realizes the jig is up. But how do we prove he is crazy? Emily asked, stopping her pacing. He lives alone. He pays his bills. Well, he usually pays his bills. Stan tapped the leather guestbook I had left on the counter. We use this, he said, this ridiculous rule book. We use the state of the house. Look at it. It is dark. It is cluttered with weird artifacts. We say he is hoarding. We say he is living in squalor. We say he is paranoid. And the fact that he left $10 million to a charity instead of his own son, that is the smoking gun. No sane man disinherits his own flesh and blood unless he is having a mental break. Tyrell looked up. His eyes were red. He looked exhausted, but there was a new hardness in his face, a resolve born of debt and desperation. He did not just disinherit me, Tyrell said softly. He erased me. I am not even mentioned in the trust. It is like I do not exist. Exactly, Karen said soothingly, putting a hand on Tyrell's shoulder. Because he forgot you, dear. He is sick. We are doing this to help him. We are going to make sure he gets the care he needs in a nice facility, and we will manage the burden of the estate. The burden. They called $10 million a burden. I watched them justify their theft. They were convincing themselves that they were the heroes of this story. They were saving the fortune from the senile old man who wanted to waste it on urban development. We need a lawyer, Stan said, not my corporate guy. We need someone who specializes in difficult family transitions, someone who knows how to cut corners. He pulled out his phone. I zoomed in on the screen. He dialed a number saved as Fixer. I listened as Stan put the phone on speaker. A voice answered. It was scratchy and impatient. Yeah, this is Miller, Stan said. It is Montgomery. I have a situation. I have an elderly relative sitting on a massive estate. He is mentally compromised. We need emergency guardianship, immediate control of assets. Has he been diagnosed? Miller asked. Not yet, Stan said. But we are working on it. The problem is he might come back. We are currently staying in his property. We need to secure the perimeter. Miller laughed. It was a dry, unpleasant sound. Possession is 9/10 of the law, Stan. If you are in the house, you are halfway there. But you need to prove he abandoned it. You need to prove he is neglecting the property. He left days ago, Stan lied. The place is falling apart. The electrical grid blew out yesterday. Good, Miller said. That is good. Document that. Take pictures of the damage. But here is the trick. If you want to show the court that you are the responsible parties, you need to start improving the property. You need to take ownership. Change the locks. Today. Right now. If he has a key and he walks in, you lose your leverage. If he has to break in, he is the intruder. Change the locks, Stan repeated, writing it down. And get rid of the hoard, Miller added. If the house is full of junk, clear it out. Call a dumpster. Tell the judge you had to sanitize the environment for his own safety. You are creating a safe space. If he comes back and his junk is gone and the locks are changed, he will freak out. He will get angry. He will scream. And then you call the police and say your senile relative is having a violent episode. That police report gets you the 72-hour hold. And the hold gets you the diagnosis. I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. It was a terrifyingly effective plan. They were going to bait me into a reaction and then use that reaction to lock me away. Got it, Stan said, grinning. Change locks, sanitize property, provoke reaction. Thanks, Miller. He hung up. He looked at the family. You heard the man, Stan announced. We have work to do. Tyrell, go to the hardware store, get new deadbolts, the heavy-duty ones. Emily, call a junk removal service. Tell them we need a same-day pickup, a big truck. What are we throwing away? Emily asked, looking around. Everything Stan said. All of it. The masks, the old books, the clothes, the furniture that smells like smoke. We are gutting this place. We are going to make it look like a model home. When the social worker comes, I want this place to look like a sanctuary that we created. Tyrell stood up. He hesitated. Dad loves those masks, he said. His grandfather made them. Stan stood up and walked over to Tyrell. He towered over my son. Do you want the money? Tyrell, Stan asked quietly. Do you want to pay off that credit card fine? Do you want to keep your wife? Or do you want to protect some old pieces of wood? Tyrell looked at Emily. She was already on her phone searching for junk removal services. She did not look at him. She was already spending the money in her head. Tyrell looked back at Stan. He nodded slowly. I will get the locks, Tyrell said. He walked out the door. He walked out on his father. He walked out on his history. I sat in my chair and watched them dismantle my life. It was methodical. It was ruthless. Within an hour, a locksmith van and a massive green garbage truck were idling in my driveway. The locksmith was quick. He drilled out the locks I had installed when Sarah and I bought the house. He replaced them with shiny generic brass handles. I heard the click of the new deadbolt sliding home. It was the sound of my home being stolen. But the junk removal crew was worse. They were 3 men in stained uniforms who did not care what they were carrying. Stan directed them from the porch, cigar in hand. Take that sofa, he ordered. And those shelves. Dump the books. We do not need to box them. Just dump them. I watched them carry out my library. Books I had read to Tyrell when he was a boy. Engineering manuals I had studied to get my degree. They threw them into the hopper of the truck. The heavy metal press came down and crushed them into pulp. They went for the art next. They pulled the tribal masks off the walls. These were not store-bought decorations. They were carvings from the Gullah Geechee people of Georgia, my ancestors. They were irreplaceable. Trash Stan yelled, "Get it out of here!" One of the workers hesitated, holding a mask that looked like a weeping woman. "This looks real antique, boss," the worker said. "You sure you want to toss it?" "I said toss it," Stan barked. "It is haunted junk." The worker shrugged and tossed the mask into the truck. It cracked as it hit the metal floor. My fists were clenched so tight my knuckles were white. I could feel the blood pounding in my ears. They were erasing me. They were not just taking the house, they were taking my identity. Then Emily came out of the back room. She was carrying something. It was the rocking chair. Sarah's rocking chair. It was a simple wooden chair made of cherry wood. I had sanded it down and varnished it myself when Sarah was pregnant with Tyrell. She had sat in that chair for hours, rocking him to sleep, singing low songs that filled the house with peace. It was the chair she sat in when she watched the sunset during her last days. It was the only piece of furniture I had explicitly forbidden anyone from touching. Emily dragged it across the porch. The legs scraped against the wood, making a sound like a scream. "This thing is hideous," Emily complained. "It is scratched and it squeaks. Get rid of it." "No," I whispered at the screen. "Not that. Tyrell, stop her." But Tyrell was busy installing the new lock on the front door. He looked up. He saw his wife dragging his mother's chair. He saw the workers waiting to throw it into the crusher. He paused. He looked at the empty space on the porch where his mother used to sit. "Tyrell, honey, give me a hand," Emily said. "It is heavy." Tyrell put down the screwdriver. He walked over. I held my breath. I prayed that he would remember the lullabies. I prayed he would remember the woman who loved him more than life itself. Tyrell grabbed the other arm of the chair. "On 3, he said. They lifted it together. They swung it. They tossed it into the open maw of the garbage truck. I watched it tumble. I watched it land on top of the crushed books and the broken masks. I watched the hydraulic press come down. I heard the wood snap. My vision blurred. For a moment I saw only red, a deep, violent red that washed over the screen. It was not a metaphor. The blood vessels in my eyes were straining against the pressure of my rage. They had thrown away my wife. They had crushed the last physical piece of her presence in that house. That was it. The line was not just crossed, it was obliterated. There was no more family. There was no more son. There was only the enemy. I reached for my phone. My hand was steady now, cold and heavy as a stone. I dialed Mr. Roth. He answered on the first ring. "Mr. Turner." "It is time," I said. My voice sounded strange even to me. It sounded like the grinding of gears in a machine that cannot be stopped. "Are you sure, sir?" Roth asked. "Once we initiate the protocol, there is no going back. The eviction is immediate. The destruction is total." I looked at the screen. I saw Tyrell wiping his hands on his pants, relieved that the heavy lifting was done. I saw Stan lighting another cigar, satisfied with his domain. I saw the garbage truck driving away, carrying the debris of my heart. "They threw away Sarah's chair," I said. There was a silence on the line. Roth knew what that chair meant. He had been at the funeral. "Understood, Sir," Roth said. His tone changed. It was no longer questioning. It was lethal. "I will contact the site foreman. The heavy equipment is staged at the depot. They can be there in 20 minutes. "Do it," I said. "And Roth, make sure the eviction notice is served by the sheriff. I want them to see the badge before they see the wrecking ball. Consider it done." I hung up. I did not close the laptop. I wanted to see their faces. I wanted to see the moment their victory turned into ash. I poured the rest of the whiskey into the sink. I did not need it. I did not need to numb the pain. I needed to be sharp. I needed to be clear. I walked to the window of my penthouse. The city lights were bright below me. Millions of people living millions of lives. And somewhere down there, a convoy of yellow machines was roaring to life, diesel engines coughing smoke into the night air. They were coming for the beach house. They were coming for Stan Montgomery. Stan wanted to prove I had abandoned the property. He wanted to prove I was negligent. He was about to find out that I had not abandoned anything. I had just cleared the blast zone. The sun was setting on the coast. The shadows were getting long. "Sleep well, Tyrell," I whispered, "because tomorrow morning you are going to wake up in a war zone." I sat in my penthouse office with a fresh cup of black coffee. The sun was just beginning to crest over the horizon, painting the sky in hues of violent orange and bruised purple. It was 6 in the morning. To most people, this was an ungodly hour. To a construction man, it was the start of the workday. On my monitors, the beach house looked peaceful. The ocean was calm. Inside the house, the Montgomery family slept the deep sleep of the victorious. They believed they had won. They believed they had successfully seized my property and erased my history. They were dreaming of the millions they would steal from my trust fund. But dreams end when the alarm clock rings, and their alarm clock was about to be a 4,000 horsepower diesel symphony. I checked the time on my watch. 5:59. I counted down the seconds. 3, 2, 1. The ground shook. It was not a subtle vibration. It was a deep guttural rumble that vibrated through the foundation of the house. It was the sound of heavy industry waking up. It was the sound of conquest. On the screen, I saw the lamps in the living room rattle. The empty wine bottles Stan had left on the coffee table clinked together like nervous teeth. In the master bedroom, Stan Montgomery shot up in bed. He looked wild. His hair was standing on end, and his eyes were wide with primal confusion. He did not know where he was. He thought it was an earthquake. He thought the world was ending. "What the hell is that?" he screamed. Next to him, Karen woke up with a shriek. She scrambled backward, pulling the sheets up to her chin as if cotton could protect her from a seismic event. "Earthquake," she yelled. "Stan, it is the big one. We are going to slide into the ocean." In the guest room, Tyrell fell out of bed. He hit the floor hard. He scrambled to his feet, looking around frantically. He ran into the hallway, colliding with Emily, who was coming out of the bathroom screaming about the noise. The roaring did not stop. It got louder. It was a mechanical grinding sound that tore through the thin wooden walls of the beach house. It was the sound of steel tracks chewing up the earth. They all ran into the living room. They were a pathetic sight in their pajamas, barefoot and terrified. They huddled together in the center of the room, looking at the ceiling, expecting the roof to cave in. "Is it a landslide?" Tyrell shouted over the noise. "The cliff. Did the cliff give way?" Stan ran to the window. He threw open the curtains. He stopped. He did not see a landslide. He did not see nature taking its course. He saw yellow, massive walls of yellow steel moving past the window. "It is not an earthquake," Stan yelled, his voice cracking with disbelief. "It is machines, huge machines." He ran to the front door and threw it open. The noise became deafening. The smell of diesel exhaust flooded the house, choking out the scent of the ocean. I switched my view to the external cameras. The sight was magnificent. 4 massive excavators were positioning themselves around the perimeter of the property. They were not small residential bobcats. These were heavy-duty commercial destroyers, the kind used to level city blocks. Their engines idled with a terrifying power. Their buckets were raised high like the claws of prehistoric beasts preparing to strike. Stan stood on the porch in his silk pajamas, staring up at the metal giants. He looked tiny. He looked insignificant. "What are you doing?" he screamed at the nearest machine. "Get away from here! This is private property!" The operator inside the cab did not even look at him. He was wearing ear protection and sunglasses. He was focused on his job. He pulled a lever, and the massive machine pivoted its tracks, churning up the flower beds and blocking the driveway completely. Stan ran down the steps. He waved his arms like a madman. "Stop," he shouted. "Stop right now. I will call the police." But nobody could hear him. The roar of the engine swallowed his voice. Then the second phase began. From behind the excavators, a team of 20 construction workers swarmed the perimeter. They were dressed in neon vests and hard hats. They moved with military precision. They carried large panels of corrugated metal sheeting and heavy posts. They began to erect a fence. It was not a picket fence. It was a construction barrier. It was 3 meters high. It was solid metal. It was designed to keep debris in and people out. They started at the road blocking the driveway. They moved fast, pounding the posts into the ground with pneumatic hammers that added a staccato rhythm to the diesel roar. Stan watched in horror as his escape route disappeared. He ran toward his rental car, but a worker was already driving a post into the ground right in front of the bumper. "Hey," Stan yelled. "You are blocking my car. You cannot box us in." The worker ignored him. He lifted a metal sheet and screwed it into place. The sound of the power drill was sharp and final. Tyrell and Emily ran out to join Stan. They stood in the yard watching the wall grow. It was happening fast, too fast. Within 10 minutes, the front of the house was completely sealed off. The workers moved to the sides, enclosing the yard. "We are trapped," Emily screamed. "Oh my God, Tyrell, do something. They are walling us in." Tyrell looked at the excavators. He looked at the workers. He looked lost. "I do not understand," he stammered. "Who are they? Why are they doing this? It is the city," Stan theorized desperately. "It must be the city. They are condemning the property because of the electrical fire. They are quarantining us." He ran to the fence line. He banged his fist on the metal. "Let us out!" he roared. "We are not the owners. We are just guests. You cannot keep us in here." A shadow fell over him. He turned around. One of the excavators had moved closer. Its massive bucket hovered just 10 feet above Stan's head. It blocked out the sun. Oil dripped from the hydraulic piston, landing in the dirt next to Stan's bare foot. Stan froze. He looked up at the machine. He realized for the first time that he was soft flesh and blood standing in the path of cold, unfeeling steel. He backed away slowly, his hands raised in surrender. "This is illegal," he whispered. "This is kidnapping." I watched from my penthouse. It was not kidnapping. It was site security. It was standard protocol for a demolition zone to prevent unauthorized access and contain hazardous materials. And right now, Stan Montgomery was the most hazardous material on the site. The fence was finished. The last panel was screwed into place, sealing the perimeter. The house, the yard, and the family were now contained inside a steel box. The only way in or out was a single heavy gate that was currently locked with a chain. The noise of the engines dropped to a low idle. The sudden relative quiet was shocking. The family stood in the yard, breathing hard, surrounded by yellow metal and gray steel. They looked like rats in a trap. Then the gate opened. A man walked through. He was a giant of a man wearing a white hard hat and a reflective vest that said, "Site Foreman." He held a clipboard in one hand and a radio in the other. He walked with the heavy, confident stride of a man who ran the world of concrete and steel. Stan composed himself. He pulled his pajama top closed, trying to muster some dignity. "Who are you?" Stan demanded, stepping forward. "I want to speak to your supervisor. You have illegally imprisoned my family. I am going to sue you and your entire company into oblivion." The foreman did not stop walking until he was 3 feet from Stan. He looked down at Stan with eyes that had seen everything on a construction site and was impressed by none of it. "I am the supervisor," the foreman said. His voice was gravel. "And you are trespassing on an active demolition site." "Trespassing," Stan sputtered. "I am the tenant. I have a lease. I signed a guestbook. This house belongs to Caleb Turner, and he gave us permission to be here. The foreman looked at his clipboard. He flipped a page. Caleb Turner, the foreman repeated. Yes, Stan said. He is a retired laborer. He is probably senile. He clearly forgot to pay his bills or something, but that does not give you the right to build a wall around us. The foreman laughed. It was a short, sharp sound. Retired laborer, he said. That is a good one. He handed a piece of paper to Stan. It was a laminated document with a city seal. This is a Class A demolition permit, the foreman stated. It authorizes the total leveling of this structure and the excavation of the foundation. It was issued 6 months ago. The scheduled start date is today. Right now. Stan looked at the permit. His hands shook. Demolition, he whispered. But the house is still here. We are still inside. Not for long, the foreman said. You are obstructing a $50 million project. Every minute you stand here talking to me is costing the developer money. Who is the developer? Stan asked. Who is doing this? The foreman pointed a thick finger toward the fence. Read the sign. Tyrell turned. He looked at the massive vinyl banner that had been hung on the outside of the fence but was visible through the gap in the gate. It showed a rendering of a gleaming glass resort that would rise from the sand. It was beautiful, it was modern, it was iconic, and at the bottom in bold silver letters it read, A Blue Horizon Development, and underneath that, in smaller but distinct text, Lead Architect and CEO Caleb Turner. Tyrell stared at the sign. He read the name. He read it again. Caleb Turner, Tyrell whispered. Emily grabbed his arm. That is your father's name, Tyrell. I know, Tyrell said. His voice sounded far away. Stan snatched the permit back from the foreman. He looked at the developer line. Caleb Turner. No, Stan said, shaking his head. No, that is impossible. Caleb Turner is a nobody. He fixes toasters. He does not build resorts. He does not own excavators. This is a coincidence. It is a different Caleb Turner. The foreman stepped closer. He leaned into Stan's face. There is only one Caleb Turner, the foreman said, and he is the man who signs my paychecks. He is the man who owns every piece of equipment you see here, and he is the man who gave the order to clear this site. Tyrell looked at the foreman. My father, Tyrell asked. My father owns all of this. The foreman looked at Tyrell with a mixture of pity and disgust. Your father owns the skyline, kid. He built half the city. I do not know what rock you have been living under, but Caleb Turner is a legend in this industry. And right now he is very unhappy that you are squatting in his blast zone. Tyrell fell to his knees in the dirt. The reality hit him like a physical blow. The blueprints he had found the night before, the $10 million trust fund, the confidence in my voice on the phone. It all made sense. I was not a poor old man hiding money in a mattress. I was a titan hiding in plain sight, and he had treated me like a servant. Oh God, Tyrell moaned. Oh God, what have I done? Stan was still in denial. He was turning redder by the second. This is a trick, he yelled. It is a prank. He printed a fake sign. He rented these machines to scare us. He is trying to intimidate me. The foreman pulled a radio from his belt. Mr. Turner, he said into the mic, the squatters are refusing to vacate. They claim the site ownership is fraudulent. Awaiting instructions. I pressed the button on my desk microphone. My voice traveled over the miles through the secure digital link and blasted out of the massive loudspeakers mounted on the construction trailers. My voice echoed across the beach house yard, booming like the voice of God. Hello, Stan. Stan jumped. He looked around wildly. Where are you? I am everywhere, Stan. My voice continued calm and amplified. I am in the walls you tried to tear down. I am in the ground you tried to poison, and I am in the contract you signed. Stan looked up at the speakers. He looked terrified. Caleb, he stammered, is that you? It is me, Stan, and you are correct about one thing. I am retired. I retired from tolerating people like you. Tyrell looked up at the speakers, tears streaming down his face. Dad, he cried. Dad, I did not know. Please stop this. You did not know because you did not look, Tyrell, I said. You saw a flannel shirt and you stopped looking. You saw a black man in a wooden house and you assumed I was nothing. I paused, letting the silence hang heavy over the roar of the idling engines. Now get off my construction site. You have 5 minutes before I start charging you the penalty fees listed in the book you signed. And Stan check page 4. The rate is $20,000 an hour. The color drained from Stan's face completely. He looked at the excavators. He looked at the fence. He looked at the sign with my name on it. He finally believed. And for the first time in his life, Stan Montgomery was speechless. Tyrell stared at the phone in his trembling hand. The screen showed the call was connected. The seconds ticked by on the display, but no sound came from the small speaker against his ear. Instead, the sound came from the sky. It rolled over the property like thunder, vibrating the metal sheets of the fence and rattling the windows of the condemned house. It was my voice, but it was amplified to a volume that demanded absolute submission. The speakers mounted on the construction trailers crackled with static before my words washed over them. "I am not on the phone. Tyrell." My voice boomed across the yard. "Put it down. Look at the gate." Tyrell dropped the phone into the dirt. He spun around toward the main entrance of the construction site. The heavy chain that secured the metal panels rattled. The padlock fell away with a heavy clank that sounded like a gavel hitting a desk. The gate did not swing open quickly. It groaned, moving with the slow, deliberate weight of heavy steel. It was a curtain rising on the final act of a tragedy. Stan Montgomery stood in the center of the yard, clutching the lapels of his silk pajamas. He tried to stand tall. He tried to look like the master of the universe he claimed to be. But the morning wind whipped his thinning hair across his forehead, and the soot from the electrical fire smeared his cheek. He looked like a shipwreck survivor waiting for rescue. He did not know that the ship coming for him was a battleship, and its guns were trained directly on his chest. Through the opening in the fence, a black limousine appeared. It was long and sleek, gliding over the uneven dirt of the construction entrance like a shark moving through water. It stopped 10 feet from where Stan stood. The engine purred a low, dangerous sound. The back door opened. A man stepped out. It was me. But it was not the Caleb Turner they knew. It was not the retired laborer in the flannel shirt and the worn work boots. It was not the quiet old man who fixed toasters and tended to his garden. This was Caleb Turner, the CEO. This was the man who stared down city councils and unions. This was the man who built the skyline. I was wearing a suit that cost more than Stan's rental car. It was a charcoal gray three-piece cut from Italian wool that absorbed the morning light rather than reflecting it. It was tailored to perfection, hugging my shoulders and tapering at the waist. My shoes were hand-stitched, leather polished to a mirror shine that repelled the dust of the demolition site. I wore a watch that was worth more than the down payment on Tyrell's house. I adjusted my cufflinks, gold squares engraved with the skyline of the city I had helped build. I did not come alone. From the passenger seat emerged Mr. Roth. He was a small man with eyes like flint carrying a thick leather briefcase. He wore a suit that was almost as sharp as mine. Behind us, 2 uniformed police officers stepped out of a patrol car that had followed the limo. The sheriff himself, a man named Miller, whom I had known for 20 years, walked up beside me. He placed a hand on his belt near his gun, not as a threat but as a statement of authority. The visual contrast was devastating. On one side stood the Montgomery family, dirty, disheveled, and terrified in their sleepwear. On the other side stood the full weight of the law and capital, impeccable and untouchable. Tyrell let out a sound that was half sob and half gasp. "Dad." He took a step toward me, his arms raised slightly as if he wanted a hug, as if he wanted me to tell him it was all a bad dream and we could go back to being father and son. I did not look at him. I looked through him. I looked at the space he occupied as if he were just another piece of debris to be cleared from the site. My eyes were hidden behind dark aviator sunglasses, reflecting their own pathetic images back at them. "Stay back!" the sheriff barked, stepping between me and my son. "You are approaching the property owner in a threatening manner. Step back." Tyrell froze. He looked at the sheriff. He looked at me. He saw no recognition in my face. He saw only a stranger, a powerful stranger who happened to share his last name. He collapsed backward, hitting the ground hard. The dust puffed up around him. Stan Montgomery, however, was not ready to accept reality. His brain could not process the image before him. He could not reconcile the black laborer he despised with the titan standing in front of him. His narcissism kicked in, a defense mechanism that tried to rewrite the script. He forced a smile onto his face. It was a gruesome rictus of teeth and fear. He clapped his hands together once, a loud, sharp sound in the quiet yard. "Okay, Caleb," Stan said, his voice wavering only slightly. "Very funny. You got us. Nice theatrics. I have to admit, you really pulled out all the stops, renting the limo, hiring these actors, putting up the signs. Bravo. You really had us going for a minute there." He took a step toward me, extending a hand that was shaking uncontrollably. But the joke is over now, Stan continued, his voice rising in pitch. Let us call off the dogs. I think we have all learned a lesson about pranks. You proved your point. You are not poor. We get it. Now tell these gentlemen to move the excavator so we can get our car out. We have a brunch reservation in the city, and I really need a shower. I did not move. I did not shake his hand. I did not speak to him. I stood as still as a statue, watching him unravel. He was trying to frame this as a game, as a misunderstanding between peers. He was trying to use the in-law card to bridge the gap between our worlds. But there was no bridge. There was only the cliff. He had tried to push me off metaphorically for years. Stan's smile faltered when I did not respond. He looked at Mr. Roth. He looked at the sheriff. He looked at the unsmiling faces of the construction workers who had gathered by the fence. Come on, Caleb. Stan said, a nervous laugh bubbling up in his throat. Do not be like that. We are family, technically. Tyrell is your son, Emily is my daughter, that makes us, is my partners. We can laugh about this over drinks. Later, I will even buy the first-round top shelf, none of that cheap stuff you left in the kitchen. He was still doing it. He was still insulting me even while begging for mercy. He could not help himself. It was woven into his DNA to believe he was better than me. I slowly reached up and removed my sunglasses. I folded them carefully and placed them in my breast pocket. I locked eyes with Stan Montgomery. His eyes were watery and bloodshot. Mine were dry and hard. I am not joking, Stan, I said. My voice was low, but it carried across the yard without the need for a microphone. I do not rent limos for pranks, and I do not hire the sheriff to act in skits. Stan's hand dropped to his side. The color drained from his face, leaving it a pasty gray. Then what is this? He whispered, gesturing at the machinery and the police. This is an eviction, I said simply. And it is a collections meeting. Collections, Stan sputtered. I do not owe you anything. I signed a guest book. A stupid little guest book. I turned to Mr. Roth. I did not need to shout. I did not need to argue. I just gave a small nod. Mr. Roth read the faults I commanded. Mr. Roth stepped forward. He opened his briefcase with a sharp click. He pulled out the black leather book Stan had signed with such arrogance just days ago. He held it up like a preacher holding a Bible. He cleared his throat. Mr. Montgomery, Mr. Roth began, his voice crisp and professional. You executed a binding commercial lease agreement for an active demolition zone labeled Site B14. By your signature, you accepted full liability for the preservation of the site and agreed to a penalty schedule for any delays to the construction timeline. Roth flipped the page. The sound of the paper turning was loud in the silence. Furthermore, Roth continued, you accepted responsibility for all utility systems and environmental compliance. Let us review the itemized list of infractions recorded by the Site Security System and the Environmental Protection Agency. Stan looked at the book. He looked at me. He realized then that the pen I had left him was not a courtesy. It was a weapon, and he had used it to sign his own execution warrant. Mr. Roth did not smile. He did not offer a handshake. He simply placed his briefcase on the hood of the nearest police cruiser and snapped the latches open. The sound was like 2 pistol shots in the morning air. He reached inside and pulled out a plastic evidence bag. Inside the bag was the black leather book I had left on the kitchen counter. The gold ribbon was still marking the page where Stan Montgomery had signed his name. Stan stared at the book. He recognized it immediately. His face twisted into a sneer of dismissal. Oh, please, Stan scoffed, waving a dismissive hand. Is that what this is about? You are upset because I did not follow the house rules in your little diary. Fine. I smoked inside Sue. I will pay for the cleaning. Mr. Roth held the bag up to the light. The morning sun glinted off the plastic. Mr. Montgomery. Mr. Roth said, his voice level and devoid of emotion. I need you to verify something for the record. Is this your signature on page 42? Stan rolled his eyes. He looked at the sheriff. He looked at me. He wanted an audience for his exasperation. Yes, that is my signature, Stan said loudly. I signed your guest book, Caleb. I signed it the minute we walked in. Just like your son asked. I played your game. Now can we stop with the theatrics? Thank you, Mr. Roth said. He handed the bag to the sheriff, who accepted it solemnly. You admit then that you executed this document willingly and without coercion? Mr. Roth asked. Executed. Stan laughed harshly. I signed a guest book, buddy. I did not sign a confession. I did not read the fine print because who reads a guest book? It is a courtesy. It is a contract, Mr. Roth corrected sharply. The change in his tone made Stan flinch. It was like watching a shark suddenly thrash in the water. Mr. Roth pulled a photocopy of the signed page from his briefcase. He held it up for Stan to see. This document is titled Short-Term Commercial Lease and Liability, Assumption Agreement for Designated Demolition Zone. B-14. It is a standard industry contract used when a third party requests access to a site scheduled for heavy industrial work. Stan blinked. Demolition zone, he repeated. Mr. Roth adjusted his glasses. He began to read Clause 1. The tenant acknowledges that the property located at this address is an active pre-demolition site scheduled for immediate leveling. The tenant accepts the property in as-is condition and assumes full liability for any delay to the demolition schedule caused by their presence. Stan looked at Tyrell. You told me this was a vacation home. Tyrell shook his head. I did not know, Stan. I swear. Mr. Roth continued, his voice relentless. Clause 4. The tenant agrees to maintain the structural integrity of all internal systems, including electrical and plumbing, until the scheduled demolition date. Any damage to these systems prior to the official teardown will be considered vandalism of corporate property and will be billed at commercial repair rates. Stan's face went pale. He thought about the electrical box he had destroyed with a hammer. He thought about the water damage. Vandalism, Stan whispered. It was an accident. The wiring was faulty. Faulty wiring does not explode when you hit it with a hammer. Mr. Montgomery, I said, my voice cutting through his panic. We have the logs from the SMART system. It recorded the impact. It recorded the unauthorized access. You destroyed a commercial-grade server rack. That alone is $200,000. Mr. Roth turned the page. The sound of the paper was the only thing audible over the idling engines. But that is not the most significant clause, Mr. Roth said. This is the one that should concern you, Mr. Montgomery. Clause 10. Obstruction of commerce. Stan looked at the excavators surrounding us. He looked at the fence. He looked at the workers who were checking their watches. Clause 10, Mr. Roth read loudly. In the event that the tenant fails to vacate the premises by the start of the scheduled work shift, or in any way prevents the deployment of heavy machinery, the tenant agrees to pay a penalty fee to cover the cost of idle equipment and labor. Stan laughed nervously. Penalty fee, he sputtered. What are you going to charge me? A late checkout fee, $50. Mr. Roth looked at me. I nodded. Tell him the rate. Roth, I said. Mr. Roth looked at Stan. The rate is calculated based on the rental cost of 4 Class A excavators, a crew of 20 unionized workers, and the opportunity cost of delaying a $50 million resort project. Stan swallowed hard. How much? Mr. Roth looked at the spreadsheet attached to the contract. The rate is $20,000 per hour. The number hung in the air. It was a physical thing, heavy and suffocating. $20,000 per hour. Stan did the math in his head. I could see his eyes moving rapidly. He looked at his watch. It was 6:30 in the morning. He had been blocking the site for 30 minutes. Okay, fine, Stan said, his voice trembling slightly. So, I owe you 10 grand. Big deal. I will write you a check right now. Just move the machines. I stepped forward. I walked until I was standing right in front of him. I wanted him to see my eyes. I wanted him to see the man he had called a nobody. You misunderstand the contract, Stan, I said softly. The clock did not start this morning. Stan frowned. What? The contract states that the demolition schedule began 10 days ago, I said. Stan's knees buckled. He grabbed the hood of the limousine to steady himself. 10 days, he whispered. Yes, I continued. You arrived 10 days ago. The permit was valid. Then. The machines were ready then. But you were in the house. You signed the book. You accepted the liability. You have been obstructing this project for 240 hours. Stan did the math again. This time the number was too big to comprehend. He shook his head, violently. No, he screamed. No, that is impossible. You cannot charge me for sleeping here. You invited us. Tyrell invited us. Tyrell invited you. I agreed. But Tyrell does not own this land. I do. And when you signed that book, you agreed to my terms. You agreed to pay for every hour you kept my crew waiting. I pointed at the excavators. Do you know how much it costs to keep 4 of these machines on standby for 10 days? Do you know how much it costs to pay a crew to sit in a trailer and drink coffee because some tourist is squatting in the blast zone? Stan looked at Emily. She was crying silently, mascara running down her cheeks. She knew what this meant. She knew her inheritance was evaporating. This is fraud, Stan yelled. It is entrapment. You tricked me. I did not trick you, Stan, I said. I left a contract on the counter. You signed it. You are a businessman, aren't you? You always brag about your deals. You always brag about reading people. Well, you failed to read the most important document of your life. Mr. Roth stepped forward again. He pulled a calculator from his pocket. He punched in the numbers, 240 hours times $20,000 per hour. Mr. Roth announced. His voice was crisp. The total penalty for obstruction of commerce is $4.8 million. $4.8 million. Stan Montgomery made a sound like a dying engine. He slid down the side of the limo and sat in the dirt. He looked at his hands. He looked at his wife. Karen was staring into space, her mind broken by the magnitude of the debt, plus damages. Mr. Roth added relentlessly. The electrical system, the water damage, the environmental fines, the destruction of the architectural model, and the theft of intellectual property. Theft, Stan whispered. I did not steal anything. You broke into a secured area marked authorized personnel only, I said. You destroyed a prototype for this resort. That model cost $50,000 to build, and you kicked my wife's picture across the floor. Stan looked up at me. His eyes were begging now. Caleb, please, he rasped. We do not have $4 million. I am liquid right now, but the market is tight. I can pay you something. I can pay you $50,000. I laughed. It was a cold, hard sound. $50,000 does not even cover the fuel for these machines. I looked at Tyrell. My son was standing apart from them watching the destruction of his in-laws. He looked at me with a mixture of awe and terror. He realized then that he had bet on the wrong horse. He had sided with a man who was drowning in debt against a man who owned the ocean. Dad, Tyrell said softly, You cannot do this. It will ruin them. They ruined themselves, Tyrell, I said. They walked into my house and treated it like a garbage dump. They treated you like a servant, and they treated me like a ghost. I am just presenting the bill. I turned back to Stan. You have 24 hours to pay the full amount, I said, or I will execute the lien clause in the contract. Lien clause, Stan, whispered clause 15. Mr. Roth said, helpful as always, the tenant grants the property owner a priority lien on all personal assets to cover any unpaid debts arising from this agreement. This includes real estate vehicles and investment portfolios. Stan looked at his wife. He thought about his house in Chicago, the house that was already leveraged to the hilt, the house he was desperately trying to refinance. You cannot take my house, Stan cried. I can. I said, and I will. You signed the book. Stan, you gave me everything. I signaled to the foreman. Clear the site, I ordered. The foreman nodded. He waved his hand. The engines of the excavators roared to life. The sound was deafening. The ground shook again. Stan scrambled to his feet. He grabbed Karen's hand. He grabbed Emily's hand. Run, he screamed. Run before they crush us. They ran toward the gate. The construction workers stepped aside, letting them pass. They stumbled out of the metal box, leaving their luggage behind, leaving their dignity. Behind Tyrell stood there for a moment. He looked at me. He looked at the family, fleeing down the road. Go with them, Tyrell, I said. You made your choice. You wanted to be a Montgomery. Go be one. Tyrell looked at me one last time. Then he turned and ran after them. I watched them go. Then I turned to the house, my sanctuary, my history. It stood tall against the blue sky, silent and proud. Do it, I said to the foreman. The first excavator raised its bucket. It swung toward the porch, toward the spot where Sarah used to sit. The wood crunched. The glass shattered. The roof collapsed. I did not look away. I watched every second of it. I watched my past turn into dust. It was worth every penny. Mr. Roth cleared his throat, and the sound was like dry leaves scraping against concrete in the absolute silence of the demolition site. He held a single sheet of paper in his hand. It was not a contract this time. It was an invoice, a bill of sale for the destruction of my home and the insult to my life. He walked over to Stan Montgomery, who was still slumped against the tire of his rental limousine looking like a deflated balloon. Stan did not want to take the paper. His hands were shaking so badly he looked like he was having a seizure. He knew what was on that paper. He knew that whatever number was written there was going to end his life as he knew it. Mr. Roth did not wait for Stan to reach out. He simply let the paper fall. It drifted through the morning air and landed on Stan's lap, bright white against the dark silk of his ruined pajamas. Stan looked down. He tried to look away, but his eyes were drawn to the bottom line, the bold black numbers that summed up the cost of his arrogance, $1,200,000. Stan made a noise. It was a high-pitched whimper, a sound that should not have come from a grown man. He read the itemized list out loud, his voice cracking with every syllable. Structural damage to the smart grid, $200,000. Environmental remediation fees, $300,000. Destruction of unique architectural prototypes, $50,000. Breach of contract. Penalties, $650,000. He stopped. He could not breathe. He looked up at me, and his eyes were wide and wet with terror. He tried to stand up, but his legs refused to work. He collapsed back onto the dirt, his expensive linen pants staining with oil and dust. $1.2 million, he whispered. It was a prayer to a God who was not listening. I do not have it. I do not have that kind of liquidity. My assets are tied up. The market is down. Caleb, please. I looked down at him. I did not feel pity. I felt the cold satisfaction of a mathematician solving a complex equation. The numbers balanced. The debt was real. It is not just about liquidity, Stan, I said, my voice flat. You signed a personal guarantee. That means I do not need your cash. I can take your portfolio. I can take your cars, and I can take that house in Chicago. You are so proud of. Stan gagged. He looked like he was going to be sick. The mention of his house broke him. It was his castle, his identity, and now it belonged to the man he had called a retired laborer. Karen Montgomery had been standing frozen by the car door, but the sight of her husband on the ground broke her paralysis. She rushed forward not to help him, but to distance herself from the disaster. She looked at the invoice fluttering in Stan's lap, and her face twisted into a mask of pure panic. She realized that her comfortable life, her country club memberships, her status were all about to evaporate. She turned her head slowly, her eyes locked on Tyrell. My son was standing a few feet away, watching the scene with a look of horror. He looked like a child watching his parents fight, but these were not his parents. They were the people who had bought his soul, and now they were looking for a refund. "This is your fault," Karen screamed. Her voice was shrill, tearing through the heavy air of the construction site. "You did this, Tyrell. You brought us here. You said this was a vacation home. You said your father was a nobody." Stan scrambled to his feet, energized by the new target. He pointed a shaking finger at Tyrell, his face purple with rage. "She is right," Stan roared. "You lied to us. You told me your father was a broke old man. You told me the house was yours to use. You set us up." Tyrell stepped back, holding his hands up in defense. "I did not know, Stan. I swear I thought." "You thought nothing," Stan interrupted, spitting on the ground. "You are a useless leech. You married my daughter, and I have been supporting you for 3 years. I paid your rent, I paid for your car, and this is how you repay me. You dragged me into a trap laid by your billionaire father. I watched my son shrink. He looked small. He looked weak. He looked at Emily, hoping for support, hoping for his wife to step in and defend him, hoping that the vows they took meant something. But Emily Montgomery was not looking at Tyrell with love. She was looking at him with the same calculation she had used when she looked at my bank statement the night before. She saw a sinking ship, and she was not going to go down with it. She saw that her parents were ruined, and she needed someone to blame. She walked up to Tyrell. Her heels sank into the soft dirt, but she did not care. She stood toe-to-toe with him. Her eyes were dry and hard. "You are a liar," Emily hissed. "Emily, please," Tyrell begged. "I did not know about the money. I did not know who he really was." "That makes it worse," she screamed. She drew back her hand and slapped him. The sound was loud, a sharp crack that echoed off the metal fence. It was the sound of a marriage ending. It was the sound of respect dying. "You are a con artist," Emily yelled, hitting him again on his chest with her fists. "You scammed us. You let us believe we were better than him. You let us humiliate him knowing he could buy and sell us 10 times over. Why did you not tell us he was Caleb Turner? Why did you let us treat him like trash?" "I did not know." Tyrell cried, tears streaming down his face mixed with the dust. "Because you are stupid," Emily spat. She pushed him away with disgust. "You are a stupid, weak man. You let us walk into a lion's den because you were too ashamed of your own father to ask what he actually did for a living. You wanted to be one of us so bad you forgot where you came from." Stan joined in circling Tyrell like a hyena. "You are going to pay for this. Tyrell, you are going to work for the rest of your life to pay off this debt. I am putting this on you. It was your invitation, your family, your mess." They closed in on him. The three of them, the family he had chosen over me, the family he had served and cooked for and cleaned for. They were devouring him. They were blaming him for their own greed, their own arrogance, their own cruelty. Tyrell looked around frantically. He looked at the excavators. He looked at the police officers who were watching with stoic faces. He looked at the fence that trapped him, and then he looked at me. He saw the man in the three-piece suit. He saw the father who had raised him alone after his mother died. He saw the man who had paid his tuition, who had paid his credit cards secretly for years, who had tried to protect him from the harshness of the world. He realized in that moment that he had been protected. He realized that the only reason he had been able to play pretend with the Montgomerys was because I had been holding him up. He fell to his knees. It was not a figure of speech. He literally collapsed into the dirt, his expensive loafers scuffing the ground. He crawled toward me. He did not care about his dignity anymore. He did not care about his clothes. He just wanted to be saved. "Dad," Tyrell sobbed. He reached out to grab the hem of my trousers, but the sheriff stepped forward, blocking him. I waved the sheriff back. I wanted to hear this. I wanted him to say it. "Dad, please," Tyrell begged, looking up at me through his tears. "Tell them to stop. Tell them it is over. I am sorry. I am so sorry. I was wrong. I was stupid. Please. Dad, help me. They are going to destroy me." I looked down at my son. I saw the boy I used to carry on my shoulders. I saw the teenager I taught to drive. I saw the young man I walked to graduation, but I also saw the man who had stood by while his wife threw my wife's chair into a garbage truck. I saw the man who had watched his father be humiliated and said nothing. The silence stretched out. It was heavy and suffocating. The only sound was the idle of the diesel engines and Tyrell's weeping. I adjusted my cufflink. I brushed a speck of invisible dust from my jacket. "You want me to help you, Tyrell?" I asked, my voice calm and cold. "Yes, Dad. Please," Tyrell cried. "Just make it stop. Pay the bill. I will do anything. I will work for you. I will sweep floors. Just save me." I looked over his head at the empty porch. I looked at the spot where the rocking chair used to be, the chair where Sarah had sat while she was dying, the chair where she had made me promise to take care of our boy. I had kept that promise. I had taken care of him, I had paid his debts, I had given him a house, I had given him freedom, and he had used that freedom to bring these wolves into our sanctuary. "Do you remember what you did yesterday, Tyrell?" I asked. Tyrell blinked, confused. "Yesterday?" "You stood on that porch," I said, pointing a finger at the empty space. "You stood right there. And you watched your wife drag your mother's rocking chair out the door. You watched her throw it into the back of a garbage truck. You helped her lift it." Tyrell flinched. He remembered. He looked down at his hands. "It was just an old chair, Dad. We were cleaning up. It was not a chair," I said. My voice dropped an octave. It was dangerous now. It was the voice of a man who had nothing left to lose. "It was your mother. It was the last thing she touched. It was the last place she held you." Tyrell began to sob louder. "I am sorry. I can buy you a new one." "You cannot buy history." "Tyrell," I said, "you cannot buy loyalty, and you certainly cannot buy back the love you threw away." I stepped closer to him. I loomed over him, blocking out the sun. "You want to know where your family is, Tyrell?" I asked. He looked up, hopeful. Desperate. "Your family was on that truck," I said. The words were final. They were a tombstone closing. "Family is not blood, Tyrell. Family is respect. Family is memory. And you let the garbage men take it all away this morning. I turned my back on him. I could not look at him anymore. It hurt too much. It hurt more than the money. It hurt more than the insults. It was the pain of knowing that I had raised a stranger. Mr. Roth, I called out without turning around. Yes, sir, Roth answered. Process the eviction and execute the lien on the Chicago property immediately. But Dad, Tyrell screamed, crawling after me. Dad, what about me? Where do I go? I stopped. I looked at the gate. You go with them, I said. You wanted to be a Montgomery. You wanted their approval. You wanted their life. Well, now you have their debt. You have their shame, and you have their future. I walked toward the limousine. The driver opened the door. I got in. I sat on the leather seat and looked out the tinted window. Tyrell was still on his knees in the dirt. Stan and Karen were screaming at him. Emily was crying into her hands. It was a tragedy, but it was a tragedy. They had written themselves. I had just provided the stage. Drive, I said to the driver. The car began to move, leaving my son behind in the dust of the life he had destroyed. The dust from the excavators hung in the air like a heavy gray curtain separating the past from the catastrophic present. Stan Montgomery sat in the dirt, his linen suit ruined, his dignity shattered. The piece of paper in his lap with the figure of $1.2 million seemed to weigh 1,000 pounds. He looked up at me, and for the first time since he had arrived in my driveway with his rental cars and his arrogance, I saw the real man beneath the bluster. He was not a tycoon. He was not a titan of industry. He was a frightened old man who had been playing a shell game with his finances for years, and he had finally run out of cups, Caleb Stan said, his voice trembling violently. We need to talk man to man, just you and me. We can work this out. I can set up a payment plan. I have assets. They are just not liquid right now. You know how the market is. Real estate is tied up. I looked down at him. The sun was reflecting off my watch, casting a beam of light into his eyes. I did not blink, Stan, I said. My voice was calm, cold, and devoid of sympathy. There is no payment plan. This is a commercial demolition site. Obstruction fee. It is due upon receipt. And judging by the way you forced my son to pay that $50,000 EPA fine yesterday, I suspect you are not just illiquid. I suspect you are insolvent. Stan flinched as if I had slapped him. Karen gasped, clutching her pearls. She looked at her husband, waiting for him to deny it, waiting for him to laugh and pull out a black card and make this nightmare go away. But Stan did not laugh. He looked at the ground. He looked at his hands, which were stained with the soil of the land he had tried to steal. It is a temporary situation, Stan whispered. His voice was so low Tyrell had to lean in to hear it. The business took a hit last quarter. My credit lines are frozen just for a few days. The bank made a mistake. My cards are locked. That is why we came here. That is why we needed the vacation home. We rented the cars on the last active card I have. We are tapped out, Caleb. We have nothing right now. The truth hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. The great Stan Montgomery, the man who had sneered at my furniture, who had called me a laborer, who had belittled my son for 3 years, was broke. He was a fraud. He had come to my house not to vacation, but to hide. He had come to live for free because he could not afford his own lifestyle. And when he saw my bank statement, when he saw the $10 million, he did not just see a windfall. He saw a lifeline. He saw the only way to save himself from drowning. You are broke, I stated. It was not a question. You are bankrupt, and you tried to have me committed to a mental institution so you could steal my money to pay your debts. You pushed my son to betray me because you needed a scapegoat. Stan began to cry. It was a pathetic sound, sob racking his heavy frame. Yes, he choked out. We were desperate. The house in Chicago is second mortgaged. The cars are leased. We were going to lose everything. If we could just get control of your trust, we could have fixed it all. We could have paid it back eventually. I swear you were never going to pay it back, I said. You were going to bleed me dry, and then you were going to throw me away, just like you threw away my wife. Yes, Chair. I turned to Mr. Roth. He admits insolvency, I said. Document that Mr. Roth was writing furiously in his notebook. Admission of bankruptcy noted. This activates the immediate seizure clause. Stan looked up, panic flaring in his eyes. Seizure. What seizure? Before he could answer, the heavy boots of the sheriff crunched on the gravel. Sheriff Miller had been standing silently by the limousine, his hand resting on his belt, watching the confession unfold. Now he stepped forward. His shadow fell over Stan, blocking out the sun. "Mr. Montgomery," Sheriff Miller said. His voice was deep and authoritative. "I have heard enough about your financial problems. Now we need to discuss your criminal ones." Criminal Stan stammered. "I haven't committed a crime." "Being broke isn't a crime. Tampering with a commercial utility grid," is the sheriff said. He pulled a pair of metal handcuffs from his belt. They glinted in the morning light. "We have the report from the fire marshal regarding the incident 3 days ago. You used a hammer and pliers to destroy a secured Turner Group utility panel, causing a high-voltage arc explosion." Stan scrambled backward in the dirt, pushing himself away with his heels. "No, that was an accident. I was trying to fix the water. The plumbing was bad. The plumbing was locked," the sheriff corrected. "You bypassed a digital security lock marked with a warning sign. You destroyed critical infrastructure. That is not just vandalism, Mr. Montgomery. That is reckless endangerment. You created a fire hazard in a high fire risk zone. The entire neighborhood could have gone up in flames because of your arrogance," Karen screamed. "Stan, tell him. Tell him it was Tyrell. Tell him Tyrell told you to do it," but Stan could not speak. The sheriff reached down and grabbed Stan's wrist. He pulled him up from the dirt. Stan was heavy, but the sheriff was strong. He spun Stan around and slammed him against the side of the limousine. The sound of the handcuffs ratcheting shut was final and terrifying. "Click, click. You have the right to remain silent," the sheriff recited. "I suggest you use it." Stan struggled against the cuffs. "Get off me. Do you know who I am? I am Stanley Montgomery. I have lawyers." "You have a public defender," the sheriff said, pushing Stan toward the patrol car, "because by your own admission you cannot afford a lawyer. And right now you are under arrest for felony destruction of property and reckless endangerment." Tyrell watched his father-in-law being dragged away. He looked at me, his eyes wide with shock. He had spent 3 years worshiping this man. He had spent 3 years thinking Stan was the epitome of success, and now he saw him for what he was. A criminal in pajamas crying in the back of a police car. Emily ran toward the patrol car, banging on the window. Dad, do not say anything. We will fix this." She turned to me, her face twisted with hate. "You did this. You set him up. You knew the power was dangerous." "I did nothing," I said coldly. "I locked the door. Your father broke it down. I put up a warning sign. Your father ignored it. He set himself up. Emily, he thought he was above the rules." The sheriff put Stan in the back seat and closed the door. The lock engaged, trapping the man who hated small spaces. Stan pressed his face against the glass, shouting words we could not hear. "Now," Mr. Roth said. Stepping forward again. "We still have the matter of the outstanding debt. $1.2 million. The criminal charges do not absolve the civil liability." Karen Montgomery stood alone in the yard, trembling. She looked at the police car where her husband was trapped. She looked at the excavators. She looked at me. "We cannot pay you," she whispered. "We have nothing." You heard him. "We are ruined. Please, just let us go. We will leave. We will never come back." I looked at Karen. I remembered how she had walked into my house with a handkerchief over her hand so she would not have to touch my door handle. I remembered how she had thrown my books into the garbage truck. I remembered her laugh when she read my bank statement. "You have nothing here," I said. "But you do have assets. Mr. Roth, the Chicago property." Mr. Roth pulled a file from his briefcase. He opened it, revealing a deed and a photo of a large brick mansion in a wealthy Chicago suburb. It was the Montgomery family home, the symbol of their status, the place they bragged about constantly. According to public records, Mr. Roth said the Montgomery primary residence in Chicago has substantial equity despite the second mortgage. The current market value is approximately $2 million. Karen S. eyes went wide. "No," she gasped. "You cannot touch our house. That is our home. We have lived there for 20 years. You lived in my house for 10 days, I said, and you destroyed it. You treated my home like a trash can. Now I am treating your home like collateral." I nodded to Mr. Roth. "Execute the lien," I ordered. "Send the digital notification to the Cook County Recorder of Deeds immediately. Place a freeze on the asset and file the foreclosure motion to satisfy the debt." Mr. Roth tapped a button on his tablet. "It is done. The lien is recorded. The foreclosure process has been initiated. The Montgomery family has 30 days to vacate the premises before the property is auctioned to pay the judgment. Karen let out a sound that was not human. It was a primal scream of loss. She fell to her knees, tearing at her hair. "My house," she wailed. "My beautiful house, you cannot take it. It is all we have left. Where will we go?" "You can go to a hotel," I said. "Or maybe you can rent a small apartment. I hear there are some affordable places in the city. Of course, you will need a credit check, and with a foreclosure on your record, that might be difficult." Karen looked at Tyrell. "Do something," she screamed at him. "You brought this monster into our lives. Do something." Tyrell stood frozen. He looked at his mother-in-law, the woman who had criticized his clothes, his job, his salary. He looked at the woman who had encouraged him to steal from his own father. "I cannot do anything," Tyrell whispered. "I do not have a house either. Remember? You made me give up my lease. You made me move in here. You said we were going to be rich." He laughed a bitter, broken sound. "We are all homeless, Karen. We are all on the street because of you, and because of him." He pointed at the police car. Karen, "Stop screaming!" She looked at Tyrell with pure venom. "You useless boy," she hissed. "We should have never let Emily marry you. You were supposed to be our retirement plan." There it was. The truth. Finally stripped of all pretense. They did not love him. They did not respect him. They saw him as an investment that had failed. I signaled to the foreman. The show was over. The debt was collected. The punishment was delivered. "Remove them," I said. "Clear the site." 2 large construction workers approached Karen. They took her by the arm. She kicked and screamed, but they marched her toward the gate. The sheriff drove his car through the opening. Stan S.'s face still pressed against the glass, watching his world disappear. I turned to Tyrell and Emily. They were the only ones left standing in the dirt. The heavy machinery engines revved up. The ground shook. The excavators began to move forward, their tracks grinding the earth. "It is time to go," I said simply. Emily looked at me. She looked at the machines. She looked at her husband. She had a choice to make, and I knew exactly what she was going to do. The sheriff's patrol car disappeared down the coastal road, carrying Stan Montgomery to a holding cell and leaving a cloud of dust that slowly settled over the demolition site. Karen was gone, dragged away screaming by the security team. Now the only sound remaining was the low, menacing rumble of the 4 excavators idling in a circle around the house like iron beasts waiting to feed. In the center of this industrial arena, only 3 of us remained. Myself, my son Tyrell, and his wife Emily. I stood by the open door of my limousine watching them. Tyrell was staring at the ground, his shoulders shaking. He looked like a man who had been hollowed out. But Emily was not looking at the ground. She was looking at me. Her eyes were darting from my Italian suit to the gold watch on my wrist, to the gleaming black car. She was doing mental arithmetic. She was calculating net worth and realizing she had made a terrible strategic error. She took a breath. She smoothed her dirty silk pajamas, trying to regain the composure of a socialite. She stepped away from Tyrell. She put physical distance between herself and her husband, as if failure were a contagious disease. She walked toward me, her face transformed. The sneer of disgust she had worn for 3 days vanished. It was replaced by a look of wide-eyed innocence, a look of vulnerability that she had probably practiced in the mirror. "Dad," she said softly. Her voice was sweet, sickeningly sweet, like rotting fruit. She reached out a hand as if to touch my arm, but stopped just short, respectful of the invisible barrier I radiated. "Dad, I am so sorry about my parents," she continued, her eyes filling with fake tears. "You have to understand. I did not know. I had no idea Stan was going to do that. I was scared. He has always been so controlling. I wanted to tell you. I wanted to stop him. But I was terrified." She took another step closer, ignoring Tyrell, who had lifted his head to watch her with confusion. "I am a victim here, too." "Caleb," she said, using my first name now, trying to create intimacy. "I never agreed with how they treated you. I always told Tyrell we should respect you. But they forced us. They threatened us. Please do not punish me for their crimes. I am family. I am your daughter-in-law." I looked at her. I saw the woman who had laughed at my wine. I saw the woman who had dragged my wife's chair across the porch. I saw the woman who had called me a tacky old man just 24 hours ago. She was a chameleon, shifting her colors to match the nearest pile of money. I did not speak. I simply reached into the inside pocket of my jacket. I pulled out a thick manila envelope. It was heavy, sealed with a red string. I tapped it against my palm. "You are right, Emily," I said, my voice neutral. "You are a victim of sorts, a victim of your own timing." Her eyes lit up. She thought she had won. She thought I was the foolish old man again, easily manipulated by a pretty face and a sob story. "Thank you, Dad," she breathed. "I knew you were a good man. We can fix this. Tyrell and we can start over. We can help you manage the estate." I laughed. It was a short, sharp sound. "Manage the estate," I repeated. "You misunderstand me, Emily. I am not offering you a job. I am offering you a mirror." I handed the envelope to Tyrell. He took it with trembling hands. He looked at me confused. "What is this?" Tyrell asked. "Open it," I commanded. "It is a gift of clarity." Tyrell unwound the red string. He slid the documents out. There were two distinct sets of papers, stapled separately. The first document was on heavy legal bond paper. The title was bold and unmistakable: Petition for Dissolution of Marriage. Tyrell blinked. He looked at the header. Petitioner, Emily Montgomery. Respondent, Tyrell Turner. He looked at Emily. "What is this?" Tyrell whispered. Emily froze. Her face went pale. The mask of the innocent victim slipped, revealing the panic underneath. "Where did you get that?" she hissed at me. "My private investigator is very thorough," I replied calmly. "He found it on your laptop when he hacked your cloud server to preserve evidence of the fraud." "You drafted it 3 weeks ago, Emily. You paid a retainer to a divorce attorney in the city. The same day you arrived at my house." Tyrell read the document. His hands shook violently. He read the date. It was dated the day before they arrived, the day she had kissed him and told him this vacation would save them. "You were going to leave me," Tyrell said, his voice breaking. "You were going to divorce me." Emily stepped back, cornered. "I had to." "Tyrell," she screamed, suddenly dropping the act. "You are a loser. You are drowning in debt. You have no future. I was only staying with you because I thought your father might die soon and leave us the house. But then I found out he was poor. Or I thought he was poor. What was I supposed to do? Sink with you. I watched my son take the blow. It was physical. He staggered back as if she had punched him. He looked at the woman he had tried to impress for 3 years, the woman he had humiliated his own father for. "You were using me," Tyrell whispered. "I was surviving," Emily spat. "But now look." She pointed at me. "Look at him. He is rich. Tyrell. He is a millionaire. And you never knew. You are so stupid. You lived in a gold mine and thought it was a cave." I stepped forward, interrupting her tirade. "Read the second document, Tyrell," I said. Tyrell looked down at the second stack of papers. This one had my company letterhead on it: Turner Group, Legal Division. It was a notice of revocation of trust, beneficiary. It stated clearly and in plain English that Tyrell Turner was hereby removed permanently and irrevocably from any and all family trusts, wills, and estate planning documents. It stated that his previous status as a beneficiary was null and void due to gross misconduct and conspiracy to defraud. Tyrell read the words. He read the number at the bottom of the page, the estimated value of the trust he had just lost. $10 million. He dropped the papers into the dirt. They fluttered down, landing on top of the divorce petition. "You cut me out," Tyrell whispered. He looked at me, his eyes empty. "You really cut me out." "I did not cut you out, Tyrell," I said. My voice was hard granite. "I freed you. You wanted to be independent. You wanted to be a big man who makes his own decisions. Well, now you are. You have no safety net, you have no trust fund, you have no wife to support, and you have no father to bail you out." Tyrell fell to his knees in the dirt for the second time that morning, but this time he was not begging. He was broken. He realized the magnitude of his loss. He had traded a kingdom for a few days of approval from a man who was now in handcuffs. "Dad, please," he moaned. "I have nothing. I have absolutely nothing." "You have your health," I said coldly. "And you have a lesson. Learn it." Emily looked at the papers in the dirt. She looked at the divorce petition. She realized her plan B had failed. She realized she could not pivot to me because I knew everything. She realized she could not stay with Tyrell because he was now officially destitute. She made a noise of frustration, a guttural growl. She turned to Tyrell, who was weeping in the dust. "You are pathetic," she screamed at him. "Get up. Stop crying. You are embarrassing me even now." She looked at me. Her eyes were full of hate. "You think you won," she hissed. "You are just a sad old man alone with your money. You have no family." I looked at the excavators. I looked at the crew standing by the fence, loyal men who had worked for me for 20 years. I looked at Mr. Roth, who had protected my interests like a bulldog. "I have plenty of family, Emily," I said, "and unlike yours, mine does not require a credit check." I checked my watch. The time for talk was over. The schedule was tight. I turned to the foreman. "Clear the yard," I said. The foreman whistled. 2 large workers approached Tyrell. They did not touch him roughly, but they were firm. They took him by the arms and lifted him to his feet. "Come on, son," the worker said. "Time to go." Tyrell looked at me one last time. His eyes were pleading, searching for a crack in my armor, searching for the father who used to read him stories. "Dad," he whispered. I did not answer. I turned away. I walked back to the limousine. I got in and closed the door. The glass was tinted. I could see out, but they could not see in. I watched as the workers escorted Tyrell and Emily to the gate. They pushed them out onto the public road. Outside the fence, outside the protection of my world. Tyrell stood on the asphalt. He looked at his wife. "Emily," he said, reaching for her. Emily recoiled. She looked at him with pure revulsion. "Do not touch me," she said. "I am done. Tyrell, I am calling an Uber, and do not follow me. I am going to my sister's. You are on your own." She walked away, pulling her phone out, tapping furiously on the screen. She did not look back. Tyrell stood alone. He was barefoot. He was wearing dirty pajamas. He had no wallet. He had no car. He had no home. He had $50,000 in debt and a divorce pending. He looked at the gate. He looked. "Sign that," said Blue Horizon Development. He looked at the name Caleb Turner. He covered his face with his hands and began to walk. He walked down the road away from the ocean, away from the legacy he had squandered. I watched him until he was just a speck in the distance. Then I picked up the radio microphone inside the limo. "Tear it down," I said. The engines roared. The buckets lifted. The first blow struck the roof of the beach house. The sound of splintering wood was the only goodbye I needed. The heavy steel gate of the construction site rattled as it was pulled open by 2 security guards. The sound was harsh and final, like the closing of a prison cell, but this time the prisoners were being thrown out into the world. The foreman walked behind Tyrell and Emily, herding them like stray cattle toward the asphalt of the public road. They did not walk with dignity. Tyrell stumbled his feet, dragging in the dust, while Emily walked with a rigid, furious stride, trying to distance herself from the man. She had called her husband 5 minutes ago. I sat in the back of my limousine, watching through the tinted glass. The air conditioning was humming softly, a stark contrast to the heat and the noise outside. I watched my son step across the threshold of the property line. He crossed from the land of the protected into the land of the forgotten. The moment his foot hit the public pavement, he was no longer my responsibility. He was just a man with a debt he could not pay and a future he could not see. The security guards stopped at the gate. They did not step outside. They stood like sentinels, forming a wall of yellow vests and crossed arms. The foreman pointed down the road. "Get moving," he barked. "You are blocking the entrance for the heavy haulers." Tyrell turned around. He grabbed the chain-link fence, his fingers curling through the metal mesh. He pressed his face against the wire, looking back at the house, looking back at me. "Dad!" he screamed. His voice was thin, carried away by the ocean wind. "Dad, please do not do this. Let me back in. I will fix it. I will work it off. Do not leave me out here." I did not roll down the window. I did not speak. I simply looked at him. I looked at the desperation in his eyes. It was the desperation of a child who had never been told no, who had never touched a hot stove because his father had always blocked the heat. But I was done blocking the heat. Today Tyrell was going to burn. Emily did not look back. She stood on the curb, tapping furiously on her phone. She was already moving on. She was already calculating her next survival strategy. She was a survivor, a parasite looking for a new host, and Tyrell was a husk, She had already drained dry. The gate slammed shut. The guards locked it with a heavy chain. The sound echoed like a gunshot. Tyrell flinched. He realized he was locked out. He realized that the barrier was real. The fence was not just metal, it was the physical manifestation of my will. He was on the outside. I picked up the radio handset in the limo. Execute, I said. The ground shook. The largest excavator, a massive yellow beast with a bucket the size of a small car, roared its engine, black smoke pouring from its exhaust stack. It pivoted on its tracks, the metal grinding against the earth. The operator inside pulled a lever, the hydraulic arm extended, rising high into the blue sky like the neck of a dragon preparing to strike. Tyrell stopped screaming. He looked up. The shadow of the bucket fell over him, even though he was outside the fence. He watched the machine approach the house where he had learned to walk, the house where he had learned to swim, the house where his mother had held him when he had nightmares. "No," Tyrell whispered. I could see his lips move. No. The operator did not hesitate. He did not care about memories. He cared about the schedule. The bucket swung down. It hit the roof of the master bedroom with a sound that I will never forget. It was a crunching, snapping sound, the sound of dry bones breaking. The timber splintered. The shingles flew into the air like confetti. Tyrell let out a wail that tore through his throat. He fell to his knees on the asphalt, clutching his chest as if he were the one being crushed. That room was where Sarah and I had planned our life. That room was where we had decided to adopt Tyrell. That room was the heart of the home, and in 1 second, it was gone, reduced to a pile of jagged wood and insulation. The excavator pulled back, tearing a massive hole in the structure. The sunlight flooded into the interior, exposing the intimate spaces of our lives to the cold gaze of the world. I saw the wall where we used to measure Tyrell's height. I saw the kitchen where Sarah taught him to cook. The machine swung again. This time, it hit the porch. It hit the spot where the rocking chair had been before Emily threw it away. Smash! The wood groaned and collapsed. The front of the house fell forward, creating a cloud of dust that billowed out toward the fence. Tyrell covered his head, his body shaking with violent sobs. He was not crying for the real estate. He was crying because he finally understood what he had lost. He had not just lost a building, he had lost his sanctuary. He had lost the one place on earth where he was unconditionally safe. He realized in that moment that the house was a symbol. It was the shell of my protection, and I had just smashed it with a wrecking ball. I watched him cry. I felt a tear run down my own cheek. It was a tear of grief for the son I thought I had raised, but it was also a tear of relief. The lie was over. The bandage was ripped off. The wound was exposed to the air, and now it could finally begin to heal, or it would rot. It was up to him. The destruction continued. The second excavator joined in attacking the garage. The sound was a symphony of violence. Glass shattered, beams snapped. The house was being erased, wiped from the face of the earth. Within 10 minutes, it was nothing but a pile of debris, a mound of trash waiting to be hauled away. Tyrell lay on the ground, curled into a fetal position. He was covered in the dust of his childhood home. He looked small. He looked broken. He looked exactly like a man who had sold his soul and found out the check bounced. Emily stopped tapping on her phone. She looked up at the dust cloud. She coughed, waving her hand in front of her face. She looked at the pile of rubble that used to be her ticket to wealth. She did not look sad. She looked annoyed. She looked like someone who had been inconvenienced by a construction delay. She put her phone in her purse. She smoothed her silk pajamas, trying to look dignified on the side of a public road. She looked down at Tyrell, who was still weeping in the dirt. "Get up, Tyrell," she said. Her voice was cold, cutting through his sobs. "You are making a scene." Tyrell looked up at her. His face was streaked with mud and tears. He reached a hand out toward her, seeking comfort, seeking a partner. "Emily," he choked out. "It is gone. It is all gone. I know it is gone. You idiot," Emily snapped. She stepped back, avoiding his dirty hand. "I have eyes. I can see the bulldozer. What I cannot see is why you are rolling around in the dirt like a baby. Stand up. You need to figure out how we are getting out of here." Tyrell struggled to his knees. "We?" he asked, hope flickering in his eyes. "We need to figure it out." Emily laughed. It was a dry, harsh sound. "There is no we, Tyrell. Not anymore." Tyrell froze. "What do you mean?" "I mean I am leaving," Emily said, checking her watch. "My Uber is 2 minutes away. I am going to my sister's house in the city. She has a guest room. She has money. And she does not have a husband who owes his father $1 million. Tyrell stood up unsteadily. Emily, you cannot leave me. We are married. We are in this together. Are we? Emily asked, raising an eyebrow. I do not think so. Tyrell, I married a man with prospects. I married a man who told me he had a future. You have nothing. You have debt. You have a criminal father-in-law and a billionaire father who hates you. You are a sinking ship, Tyrell, and I am not drowning with you. But I did it for you, Tyrell screamed, the anger finally breaking through his grief. I listened to you. I listened to your father. I treated my dad like trash because you told me to. You said we needed the money. You said we deserved it, and you believed me, Emily said with a shrug. That is your problem. You are weak, Tyrell. You let my father walk all over you. You let me push you around. A real man would have stood up to us. A real man would have protected his father, but you are not a real man. You are just a follower, and now you have no one left to follow. A silver sedan pulled up to the curb. It was the Uber. Emily waved at the driver. She opened the back door. She did not offer Tyrell a ride. She did not offer him $1. She did not even look at him one last time. She got in and slammed the door. The car pulled away, disappearing down the coast road, chasing the ghost of the life she wanted. Tyrell stood alone on the side of the road. The ocean was behind him, vast and indifferent. The pile of rubble that used to be his home was in front of him, destroyed by his own choices. The fence locked him out. The limo was a black fortress he could not breach. He was barefoot. He was wearing dirty pajamas. He had no wallet. He had no phone. He had dropped it inside the gate. He had no wife. He had no father. He turned toward my limousine. He could not see me through the dark glass, but he knew I was watching. He walked up to the window. He placed his hands on the glass, leaving muddy prints. He leaned his forehead against the cold surface. Dad, he whispered. His voice was muffled, but I could hear it. Dad, I am sorry. I am so sorry. Please open the door. I have nowhere to go. I looked at his hand on the glass. I looked at the wedding ring on his finger. The ring he had bought with my money for a woman who just abandoned him. I reached for the door handle. My fingers brushed the latch. For a second, the father in me wanted to open it, wanted to pull him inside and tell him it would be okay. Wanted to fix it one last time. But then I looked at the rubble. I looked at the spot where the rocking chair had been. I remembered the disrespect. I remembered the greed. I remembered that if I saved him now, he would never learn. He would never grow. He would just wait for me to die so he could sell the next thing. I pulled my hand back. I picked up the intercom to the driver. Let us go, I said. The engine of the limousine purred. The car began to move smoothly, pulling away from the curb. Tyrell stumbled back. He watched the car move. He watched his salvation drive away. He ran after us for a few steps. Dad. Dad. Come back. But the car was too fast. He stopped. He stood in the middle of the road, dust swirling around his ankles. He looked small. He looked alone. I watched him in the rearview mirror until he was just a speck against the blue horizon, a speck of regret in a landscape of consequences. I turned forward. I looked at the road ahead. It was clear. It was open. The lesson was taught. The price was paid. Now it was time to build something new. Something that could not be torn down by greed. I closed my eyes, and for the first time in a month I felt peace. 1 year later, the air in Malibu smelled different. It no longer smelled of diesel smoke and wet cement. It smelled of jasmine, sea salt, and expensive champagne. The Blue Horizon Resort stood tall against the California sky, a masterpiece of glass and steel that reflected the ocean like a jewel. It was the crowning achievement of my career, a $50 million promise kept to myself. But the most important part of the resort was not the penthouse suites or the infinity pools. It was the lobby. I stood in the center of the atrium, surrounded by senators, investors, and the city elite. They were drinking wine and marveling at the architecture, but I was looking at something else. In the center of the lobby, bathed in natural light from the skylight, stood a statue. It was cast in bronze, life-sized, and incredibly detailed. It was a woman sitting in a rocking chair. She was looking out toward the ocean, a gentle smile on her face. It was Sarah. I had hired the best sculptor in the world to recreate her, to recreate the chair that Emily had thrown into the garbage truck. The bronze chair would never break. It would never rot, and it would never be moved. Underneath the statue, a plaque read, "To Sarah, who built the foundation of this life." Guests walked past it, touching the bronze hand with respect. They did not know the story. They did not know that this statue stood on the exact spot where the real Sarah had sat while she was dying. They just saw love immortalized in metal. "Mr. Turner," a voice said, interrupting my reverie. It was Mr. Roth, looking sharp in a tuxedo. "The car is ready, sir. The press is waiting outside for the ribbon cutting." I nodded. "Thank you, Roth." I walked toward the main entrance, my reflection caught in the glass doors. I looked younger than I had a year ago. The weight of the secret life was gone. The weight of supporting a son who despised me was gone. I was lighter. I was free. We walked out into the warm evening air. Flashbulbs popped. The valet stand was busy. A line of Bentleys and Ferraris stretched down the driveway, waiting to be parked. I looked at the valets. They were young men in crisp white uniforms, running back and forth, sweating under the lights. They were working hard, hoping for a tip, hoping for a break. One valet stood out. He was older than the others. He moved a little slower. He kept his head down, avoiding eye contact with the guests. He opened the door of a silver Porsche and handed the ticket to the owner, his hand shaking slightly. I stopped. I knew that posture. I knew the slope of those shoulders. It was Tyrell. My son was parking cars at my hotel. He looked up. He saw me standing on the red carpet surrounded by cameras and applause. He froze. The keys to the Porsche dangled from his fingers. He looked at my suit. He looked at the resort rising behind me. He looked at the name, Turner, glowing in blue neon above the entrance. For a moment the noise of the party faded away. It was just me and him, separated by 50 feet of pavement and a lifetime of choices. He looked thin. His face was lined with stress and exhaustion. The arrogance was gone, burnished away by a year of hard reality. He was no longer the man who demanded a beach house. He was a man who was grateful for a paycheck. I did not feel anger. I did not feel triumph. I felt a quiet acceptance. This was the natural order of things. Gravity works. Actions have consequences. If you tear down a house, you have to live in the rubble until you build a shelter of your own. Tyrell took a step forward. His lips parted. He wanted to say something. He wanted to call out Dad. He wanted to ask for forgiveness. He wanted to ask for a job indoors. He wanted to be saved, but he stopped. He looked at the bronze statue of his mother, visible through the glass doors. He remembered the chair. He remembered the garbage truck. He remembered the choice he made. He lowered his head. He turned back to the Porsche. He got in and drove it away toward the parking garage. He accepted his place. He accepted that he had to start at the bottom because he had tried to skip to the top without climbing the stairs. I watched him go. I hoped that one day he would work his way up. I hoped that one day he would have his own company, but he would do it on his own. He would do it without my safety net. "What about the others?" Roth asked quietly, standing beside me. "Have you heard?" I turned to Roth. I did not need to ask who he meant. "Stan and Karen Montgomery," I said. Roth nodded. "They lost the house in Chicago. The foreclosure auction was last month. It did not cover the full judgment. Of course, they are currently living in a basement apartment in Cicero. Stan is working under the table as a telemarketer. His wages are being garnished to pay the environmental fines. Karen is working at a diner washing dishes. They are hiding from 3 different loan sharks." I listened to the report. It was a grim accounting. The high society life they had faked was gone, replaced by the grind of poverty they had mocked. "Do you want to pursue the remaining debt?" Roth asked. "We can keep squeezing them. We can take every dime they make for the rest of their lives." I looked at the ocean. The waves were crashing against the shore, eternal and rhythmic. "No," I said. "Let them go. The debt is paid." "Paid?" Roth asked, surprised. "You are forgiving the balance. I am not forgiving the money." "Roth," I said, "I am forgiving myself. I am letting go of the need to teach them anything else. They are living in their lesson. Every day they wake up in that basement. Every day they wash a dish or make a cold call, they remember. They remember the beach house. They remember the contract. They remember the man they called a nobody. That is punishment enough." Roth smiled. "Understood, sir." I will close the file. I walked down the steps toward my own car. My driver opened the door. I paused. Looking back at the resort one last time, it was beautiful. It was strong. It was built on bedrock. I had spent my life building structures. I had thought that if I built a strong enough foundation for my family, they would stand tall. But I had learned that you cannot build a foundation for someone else. They have to pour their own concrete. I got into the car. The leather was soft. The interior was quiet. Where to? Mr. Turner, the driver asked. Home, I said. And for the first time in a long time, I knew exactly where that was. It was not a building. It was a state of mind. It was the peace of knowing who I was. It was the dignity of living without lies. I closed my eyes as the car pulled away. The image of Tyrell parking cars stayed with me. But it did not hurt anymore. It was just a fact. A brick in the wall of the past. I had been ruthless. Yes, I had destroyed them. Yes, but in destroying the lies, I had saved the truth. I touched the fountain pen in my pocket. The brass was warm. My name is Caleb Turner. I am 69 years old. I am a builder, and I finally finished my most important project. I built a life that no one can ever tear down again. The biggest mistake my son and the Montgomerys made wasn't just signing a contract they didn't read. It was judging a man by his cover. They looked at a black man in a flannel shirt and saw a servant, not a master builder. They confused humility with weakness and silence with submission. They learned the hard way that true power doesn't need to show off. It sits quietly in the background, waiting for the right moment to strike. Never sacrifice your dignity for people who only value you for what they can take. Because when the dust settles, the only thing that stands tall is the truth. If you believe that respect should never be compromised, hit that like button and subscribe to my channel for more stories of justice served cold. Tell me in the comments, have you ever had to teach a toxic family member a hard lesson about self-worth? I want to hear your story.